Which one is the meme interface and which one is the good one?
Anything that Griffin and Griffin's friends like is a meme interface. The dangerous music sauce, the
No
that's
one even, no one in our circles knows about this thing. This is firmly pro audio. No one cares about this in audiophile.
okay.
I mean,
Okay.
people care about the dangerous music stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just talking about the interface I'm using right now.
All right. We're
Hello.
live. Hello,
We have
everyone.
no idea what our levels are, so you guys need to tell us.
Yes,
Yeah, for
exactly.
real.
As usual, we do not have a producer for this. This is community run. This is the charitable way of describing that. Goddamn shambolic is the other way to describe it. So, greetings from greetings from the cabal.
Oh God.
Great way to start.
Yes, exactly. All sound is good. Sound levels are lovely. All right, well, let's just launch right in. So I have with me Blaine, of course. Oh wait, over here, Blaine, and then on this side is listener, aka Griffin, who wrote the article that we are going to be talking about today. And so we want to get some Q&A for that article for people who haven't read it. Check out the link in the description. Definitely check that out, but we'll also be talking about it here as well. And before we get going, as usual, big shout outs to headphones.com for making all of this possible. If you guys are interested in our written content, that's up on headphones.com as well. Our forum is also linked in the description, as is our Discord, and that's where many of us folks hang out and talk about all kinds of, nerdy audio stuff, including all things measurements and all that good stuff. So with that out of the way, let's dive right in and start with some Q&A on the topic of, we'll wait for Q&A, but maybe if you can summarize a little bit the article that you wrote, because it gained a lot of traction online, both in our communities, but then also in, on Reddit and in other places online as well. It has to do basically with what the new system, the 5128 and 4620, mean for IEMs in the future.
Yeah. So I guess the TLDR is IEMs have sounded weird for a while, and we haven't really had much coherent, all in the same place evidence for why. And after peeping all the measurements from Crin and Resolve on the 5128, comparing them to the DF baseline, diffuse field baseline, which, is our chosen baseline for analyzing headborne transducers, it seemed things were kind of janky. And after correcting some of the janky sounding IEMs to that baseline, I found it was a massive improvement. Then going deeper into why the 5128 showed those differences only gave me more and more evidence to why it was probably a good idea that we move to this system and take the output of this new measurement system seriously, as I believe it can help close the gap in weirdness, make things sound more congruent between speakers, headphones, and IEMs, at least in terms of tonality. There are always going to be, spatial differences there, but that's the short of it.
So I want to get into this because I have many questions as well, or just thoughts and suggestions and ideas.
Oh, sorry. Someone's trying to defraud me at my bank. I'll be right back.
Okay. While he's
Hi, Blaine.
doing that, I wanted to kind of see if maybe my reframing or summarizing of this makes a certain amount of sense. We'd had tunings on 711, and you sort of summarized the issues with that in your article quite well. I thought, Critical and I are obviously focused on the ones that we'd sort of expressed already with, maybe the starting point shouldn't have been the same for over ears as it was, or for in ears as it was for over ears in the Harman research. And then this maybe led to, an overcompensation, I suppose, by the listeners, because they weren't able to actually adjust anything other than the bass. And the bass was fixed as well, if I remember correctly. So, but you're also pointing now to the other issue, which is what Jude has raised, and or at least it's adjacent, similar to what Jude has raised, which is that it's the coupler itself that explains some of this problem as well. And so and I think Blaine, you've talked about this as well, but when I sort of posed the question a long time ago is, do you think it's what Corinne's talking about? Do you think it's what Jude talking about? And you mentioned that it's a bit of column A, a bit of column B, maybe, right? This is sort of a good summary of that as well. And the way that I'm understanding what you sort of done here with your work towards the delta target, as it's been dubbed, is it's kind of giving a rough estimation of what the changes would be on 711. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, within reason. I would say the differences we really should be paying most attention to are under 1 kilohertz. I think for one, that's where the more interesting differences are, but two, I feel it's also where the most consistently grouped the differences are. So I think the delta target, if you compare it to something like Harman's 2016 curve, their first curve, it's actually very similar above 1 kilohertz. And to me, it seems like from the evidence I've seen, the two systems aren't exactly super incongruent. 5128 and 711 above 1K are like, it's mostly insert depth differences that I'm seeing. Blaine, you can feel free to disagree and chime in. But
sorry,
they both use...
Just to clarify, insert depth differences among 711 or between
711? No,
between,
yeah, it's a different front volume size is basically, or length, I guess,
yes,
is the proper way to say that.
So if you look at if you look at the figure 11, I think you'll see what the listener.
Let me see if I can grab that here. Hold on a second. This is.
I'm pretty sure I know which figure 11 is because I get a lot of people.
Sorry, figure 14 rather. 14. The one that's the Giz Audio timeless.
Oh, the one that's just the overlay of all of the squig links with the delta target.
Yep.
Let me see if I can pull that up here.
Also, Andrew, you need to go up 3 dB.
I have made some adjustments here. Sorry, the guys have disappeared here. 1 second. Figure 11.
No, it's better this way.
No, it's not. I'm pulling up figure 11. So
no, 14.
14? Okay. Yes. All right. Here we go. So there we go. So this is what we're talking about. And I don't know what's going on with the cartoon in the background, but maybe if you could...
It's not a cartoon child.
Yeah, well,
yeah, it is a cartoon adult. It's Rikudo Goku's squig link site has that. Literally for this image, I just overlaid a bunch of the same measurement at the same normalization in Photoshop and just show them all on top of each other.
That's why there's the Giz Audio thing as well.
Yeah, so it's just a bunch of different squig sites overlaid with Crin's 5128 measurement.
Right. So, what was the rest of the takeaway on this chart or on this image?
Oh, it's basically that, to me, the most significant and interesting differences are below 1K, and that's what I find the delta target to be mostly useful for. Whereas the stuff above is going to be mostly similar to any, whether it's Harman's in-room or the diffuse field target at a similar tilt. The differences are going to be very minor, except for the length of the canal of the 5128 being bigger means you're going to get the resonance peak shifted downwards towards 7K instead of the 8K that most of the 711 people are going for. But that can vary. It's limited by the ergonomics of the pinna and how the shell interacts with that.
Right. So. We're back, by the way. So
we're back.
I have a question for you, and
sure,
for both of you guys actually. So you know how like there was just some recent news about how Dr. Olive is potentially he's working on new IEM research. Whether or not that's going to be public, I don't know, but there's been some noise made about that.
Big news.
Yeah. If I sort of hypothesize, I wonder, I've been wondering if instead of letting people adjust the bass at the fixed point, what do you think the outcome would have been even on 711 if rather than adjusting for a shelf at around whatever it was, like 100 hertz, they adjusted for slope below 300? Do you think we would have ended up with something similar, more similar to the delta target that you've arrived at?
Well,
here?
first, it should be made clear that the 2016 paper that led to the first target, they were able to adjust the frequency as well as the amplitude of the shelf. So,
they preferred it about where they got it.
They preferred what?
So they preferred it around 100 hertz.
Right.
Yes. I think it was like 112 hertz or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they could have chosen to use that shelf to compensate for kind of the shape of 711's overestimation under 1 kilohertz to an extent. Go ahead, Blaine.
Okay, so and this is something where I do want to like, and we talked a little bit about this in the article in the acoustic impedance section, which is partially written by me. The differences that you see in that band are going to be specific to the acoustic impedance of the source, right? So when we say it overestimates by this amount or underestimates by this amount, all of that presumes for a given source impedance. It's sort of like saying that, the HD 600, the frequency response changes by 3 dB at 150 hertz. Well, okay, that's true if you have a 600 ohm or 400 ohm or whatever it is source impedance. But not all IEMs have the same acoustic impedance. So that's something that will change. And you have some plots that highlight that that's not a consistent variation there. So it's I just don't want people to assume that's an inherent and static feature rather than a trend.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And it is not something that is the same IEM to IEM. Or even the same IEM at different circumstances, like different insert depths and stuff like that is going to affect that. Especially if it's a high acoustic output impedance IEM. Like I've noticed like sealed BA IEMs to like have significant variation in the pressure band under 1K depending on insert depth. So yeah, it's not something that is just one curve and we can compensate for that and that's it.
Right. I suppose there are a number of things that immediately jumped out in my mind when I read the article. One of them was, well, first of all, that, we've also said that, you can't do the one-to-one comparisons across different heads, essentially. I mean, I've always sort of thought that was more, it was a greater effect for over-ear headphones than for in-ears. Because with in-ears, it's going to be different for individual people regardless. And so it's less of a downside, I suppose. But the other thing I was thinking about is, and I'm going to, again, play a little bit of inside baseball here, but there was a while ago, there was a product that we were working on. It's going to remain nameless because we've sort of shifted away from that, or at least we might revisit it at some point. But there was something we were working on that... The challenge was we couldn't figure out what the tuning was supposed to be because there was so much disagreement that ultimately came down to people having different measurement rigs. And so we were using the 5128. And I remember thinking at the time, like, this is so much better with, I remember thinking, like, there's nothing sounds right if I try and tune this on 711 in comparison. So, but how can I translate that to other people who are using 711, who are involved in the same project? And ultimately, that's probably why we weren't able to continue working on it. At least that's one of the reasons. With the delta target or the concept that you sort of put forward here, part of me feels like this is a step in the right direction, not because it's a perfect one-to-one, comparison between 4620 and 5128 and 711. Rather, this is something that can be actually very useful when it comes to tuning products even on 711. That's sort of my takeaway from all of this.
I would say at best, it meaningfully gestures towards what I feel would be a more congruent sound between the two systems.
Yeah.
Like it again, not one-to-one static compensation as it varies. But yeah, and to be perfectly blunt about it, my aim in popularizing that target across so many databases on SquigLink was a completely selfish endeavor. I
remember when you started working on it, actually.
Yeah, it was very much so with the intent to get manufacturers to take notice, and you know, because generally that's how it's kind of gone. Is the popular targets get seen eventually, and then they start to take the hint.
Well, and also we fall into this trap of things trending towards what
everything being tuned the same.
Yeah, exactly. And it just turns out that that was. I mean, I don't know if you guys feel as strongly about this as I do, but I just feel like a lot of it's been tuned not quite right, not for lack of trying or anything, but because of certain limitations that people have had with the equipment that they're using. And
yeah, I mean, if I didn't feel that way, I wouldn't have written the article.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention is this isn't to say that what's going on with the Harman research is somehow bad or incorrect or bad science or anything like that, because as I've had to note a couple times, like the preferences are what they were, right? Like that's nothing about that changes now, right?
Well, there is an important nuance to observe with the Harman stuff, which is the preferences that were established in Sean's paper were established with one specific IEM. So if we knew how that particular IEM measured on the 5128, we'd actually have a much better predictor of what preferred IEMs on the 5128 would be.
That is a really good point. Yeah,
because it was all with the virtual in-ear listening method, which was using a dynamic driver with a microphone in the front volume. And I don't actually know how that particular unit would measure on the 5128.
Right.
Yeah, I remember when I first read the 2016 paper, which was probably like maybe a year and a half ago. I did look on eBay to find a unit of the IEM because it's not in production anymore, I don't think. And obviously it was custom modified with the mic in the front volume, so I don't think it would be a comparable circumstance anyway. But I was curious about it because I did want to see how it would measure on my own 711 coupler.
Right. So now we are, I mean, one can hope that manufacturers take notice, right? I mean, I think once Clinical got the 4620, it was like, that was already a step. And, he made the big revision to his own target, and that was already a step, towards this sort of, or at least acknowledging this, right? Yeah. But as you've noted as well, the DT200 came out a while ago.
Yeah, I mean, so Clinical's first target is called the IEF 2020 target, and the DT200 was 2019.
Yeah.
So like post-Harman, but pre-Crin.
Now,
I guess.
Someone actually asked this question. How is it? Surely surely many of those were not tuned. The ones that do well, let's say, many of those were not tuned on the 4620 or the 5128.
Yeah, I mean, like almost certainly.
Yeah. So, and I don't know about the Hexa, but the Hexa also measures really well on the 5128, but it probably wasn't tuned on the 5128.
Well, we'd have to assume that people do listen to these things sometimes.
That's what I was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we've existed in an era of IEMs where the vast majority of them had this massive dip in the lower mids, and now it's finally revealed that actually that's probably not quite right, and in my view, at least, it goes to show that it's pretty easy for people to be wrong, especially when there's sort of a trend of products getting tuned a certain way.
I might reframe it a little bit. I'm not sure I would say that even though I wrote the article, I'm not sure I would say that the dip in the low mids is wrong.
No, it's false. It's wrong.
I mean,
we can have strong perspectives.
For my preferences, absolutely.
Yes.
And it's not really a discussion. But, for one, Harman's research does exist, and they pretty clearly do point to that dip being preferred.
Yeah.
And then, you have pretty common industry or market items like the Moondrop variations or other things that are tuned roughly to that curve
I was even
that
thinking,
like a ton of people love.
I was even thinking like the Blessing 3 is extreme in that regard. It's
yeah. I heard that at Can Jam. Man, I really did not like that IEM.
Yeah. See, like I can expect that people will like it, but to me it's like when people are subjectively listening to this stuff and reporting on it, it's very easy to miss that when there's such a strong bass elevation. You know?
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
we
that
have
was
a question
part of my
in chat about what precisely you guys mean for lower mid dips. So
Um,
if we have an illustration, that
Yeah,
would be
let me
great.
pull one of those up here.
yeah, there's the thing in my article, or you could just go to my squig link. Hold on, I might have something good here.
Hold on a second, guys. Let's pull up the article. Do you know what figure it is that would help us here?
No, it's towards the end though. It's in the bass bleeding into the mids section.
Also, you should show the logo that I posted in the Discord.
Nope.
It's very important to me.
Let me find this first. So I was
Blaine.
saying somewhere around like 300 hertz.
Yeah.
Something like that, and
Mhm.
maybe even. Okay, I don't know. I can't find it here.
Hold on. I'm posting one that might be a little bit simpler anyway. It's going to be in our Discord chat.
Okay, I will find that
now.
here. Okay, 1 second.
So that's compensated to the 5128 diffuse field, normalized at 200 hertz. And that is a group of... Oh, you're looking at the list. Definitely show that first.
Unfortunately, it's opened itself in like the most enormous way possible. So
it's a very big file.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
it's a very important file.
Let me see if I can fix this here, guys.
Its size is proportional to its importance.
Okay.
You
mean the Dr. Olive one? Or
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think I've got it here. Success. All right. So in this example, you have here average headphone in, I don't know what color that is.
Yellow.
Mucus.
Yeller.
Mucus.
and then average IEM in blue. And
there's 200 hertz.
Headphones.com would like to note that if your mucus is that color for more than 3 days, you should contact your physician.
Exactly. So for IEMs, we have this dip for the average IEM at least, starting from around 300 to about 800, 900 hertz. And on some,
I generally choose to frame it as a counterclockwise tilt instead of a dip.
Yep.
But
yep.
Yeah.
Well, I was also going to say, like, this is average, right? So, like, on many popular ones, it's probably even more extreme than this. Because in this one,
like on the Harman IEMs, for example,
yeah, exactly. And even like the sort of traditionally well received IEMs of the past, right? Like many of them have this as well.
Yeah.
All right, let me bring us back.
No, hold on. They need to see it. The people need to know.
All right, guys. All right, I will add this to the stream. How about that?
So was this graphic made by Val?
Yes, credit to Val. No, wait. Yes, it was Val.
Yeah. So I remember she also made the 7-Eleven coupler one.
And the Burger King B&K.
Oh yeah.
We have fun here.
We do.
Yeah.
All right.
We're just palling around.
You guys talk amongst yourselves. Talk about various different things while I get this.
Yeah, hold on. I'm checking the chat to see if anyone's got anything interesting. Hi Zamba. Hi Cammy. Hi Kerka. Hi.
Okay, you've gone a bit too far on that one.
Yeah, I certainly have.
Hi Zhao. Hi Val. Hi Eminent One. Hi ADVC. Hi Sid. Hi Rev. Hi Bayan. Okay.
All right.
I think
Okay,
So-
someone says, what are we talking about? There are tons of IEMs that don't have tucked mids, so what's the problem?
I would actually say there are not a ton of mids that do not, or not a ton of IEMs that don't have the tucked mids on
There are some.
5128. There are
Like-
definitely some, and I had to go out and find them, but there really aren't many.
All right.
As a proportion of like the total measured stuff in like Crin's library, for example, it is
We
a
probably
minority.
shouldn't keep that for too long, but
Why
I wanted
not? It's your fault.
because
You
people
did
would
this.
think we're making fun of Sean as opposed to worshiping Sean.
It is
Yeah.
definitely worshipping.
Yeah. That's
Sean, I have a small idol of him on my bedside table.
For legal reasons, that's a joke.
I don't know if it's a joke.
Oh my god, is it not a joke?
Anyways,
Oh no.
okay. So I think folks kind of get the point. Well, at least hopefully. If you don't get the point of the article, please ask questions now. And I want to get Blaine's take on this, on sort of just this first doing it, but then also whether we can expect any meaningful changes, if that makes sense.
Like to the average IEM curve?
Yeah. Because so the reason let me back up. So what we're doing for IEMs, and I still have to badger the guys who are working on this to make this change, but we'll probably be using population average for both
please.
for both the DF-HRTF of 5128 and when we measure stuff on Gross Guimar. And I suppose the question would be, why wouldn't we use delta?
And in this case, delta is
Just a curve that compensates for the pressure band deviation between the two systems, I guess.
I mean, from my point of view, if we have an accurate reference point, right, that's the 5128, then we should be showing that. And it's also then worth showing the actual results that people will be getting on normal couplers, right? Because the majority of people are using 6318-4/711 couplers. So compensating them seems a bit odd to me, and we have the more human-like reference already, so we really should be using that. There is also the question of how accurate this is to actual human experience, right? Because that's something we know that the 711 has a less accurate impedance to the human ear. What we are not entirely certain of is that the 711's in situ response is less accurate than the 5128's to, say, 20 people, right? So that's something that I'd actually really like to test at some point. I think that a slightly modified version of Sean's methodology would be really good there, putting a mic in an IEM, right?
Right.
Yeah, I remember you brought up at one point having a second probe mic somewhere further towards DRP to kind of get the sense of
to figure out what
the
elements
system
would link
reacts.
modes.
I mean,
Yeah.
Blaine wants to walk up to people and just probe their ears, stick microphones as far in as possible.
I have
People
done
need
this
to let
before, and I
Blaine-
will do this again.
Yes, people need to let Blaine probe their ears.
Yeah.
If we want things to progress, people need to get probed.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually, can I ask a person in chat a question? I'm just sort of actually interested. This guy Resolution is pretty ardent that there are a decent population of
I've seen
IEMs that currently have this behavior. Can you post some of them? I'm interested. Anyway,
On the 5128?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're so interestingly, if you hold on, I have an example that I can pull up.
Is it the DT200?
No, it's a bunch of IEMs, and
Okay.
it's a graph that's on 711, but I think it gets the point across. One sec here. Just gotta
So-
find it.
I don't think that there's any debate that there are some. Also, listener found some. I think it's more that the point is that there is a trend in that where the dip is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hold on. It's in. Yeah. So this is from Harmon's 2016 paper, and the reason I posted this in my article was to illustrate that the only IEM in their test that had less low mid-range than the 2016 target was either broken or an airline earbud.
Yeah, that looks like an airline earbud.
So, yeah. But I have a question. Like, what frequency band are you talking about? Resolution? Are you talking about like 200 hertz? Are you talking about 500 hertz?
The issue is that area is mid clarity.
Well, it all depends on the rest of the tuning. You can't just say that, yeah, we're talking about, well, 300 is probably where that's probably the most common area where it gets extreme. Like in examples like the Blessing 3, right? That's the one I'm thinking of, where it's pretty significant at around, 3 to 400 hertz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, hold on. And I think that picture I just sent kind of illustrates where we're talking about the deficit being. Again, this is on 711, but
which one? The
second one.
Is this in your article? Because it's way easier for me to pull it up. Okay, let me just do that. Yeah, you're turning me into the production guy here.
I mean, if you
want
someone else to run the stream, I can do it.
That's okay.
It just means that you'd have more Dr. Olive established.
That's right.
I'm on there.
I'm all for it. All right, let's get to that image. I see it.
While our faces aren't on stream, I'm gonna take a bite of my snack here.
Just eat food on stream, coward.
Why is this not? Here we go.
Yeah, I guess I could.
You really don't have the streamer mindset yet.
This is only my second one. I'm still a streamer baby.
All right, so if you could, I have the graph up now.
Yeah, so that is 50 IEMs that I measured, or sorry, not that I measured.
That you scraped.
That Crane measured on his 711 coupler that I EQ'd to my preferred tilt of the DF reference point. And the area we're talking about there being a low mid deficit in is that kind of 400 hertz area.
Yeah.
If you were to compare that to something like, IEF neutral 2020, which is flat in the mids, you'd see it's not just like a 400 hertz bump, but it's more like a overall rise under 1 kilohertz with a slight, for lack of a better term, nipple at 400 hertz.
Adding that to my audiophile term tier list.
Yeah, but that's just the result I got from doing that.
Right.
And that's generally where I hear subjectively there to be a timbral issue on many, if not most, of the IEMs.
Now, folks are obviously going to say, well, you're just one person, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think
and so resolution said if you elevate that area, you lose mid clarity, which I could absolutely see that being someone's subjective impression.
I think you can't just say if you elevate that area, that entails a loss in clarity. I think it all depends on what else is going on with the tuning. Like you could say it has an effect, but
it tends to make vocals thicker.
Yeah, but maybe that makes
vocals.
Them right. But in situations where they're super thin, that could actually add clarity because of due to whatever else is going on with the tuning. So I suppose if you're saying all else equal and if everything else is normal,
right.
But
okay, let's get some questions from the chat. Unless Blaine, did you have anything that we
I actually didn't get to the. You were asking like, do I think that like IEM companies are going to adopt a new curve? And I have a take that I haven't heard yet, but I think is one that needs to be aired. It's going to depend on basically Kren's targets. Like for the smaller Chinese IEM manufacturers, they very explicitly are aiming to have a line that looks good on in-ear fidelity.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that a lot of what the industry, particularly for those, I don't want to call them meme brands. I don't know what to call them. Like small brands that are very tuned in to the latest trends in the audio community. The people who use electrostatic tweeters or bone conduction drivers.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So like the brands that have Discord servers themselves, like Linsol.
Yeah, probably. Well,
the audio
and the ones who pay a lot of attention to head phis up to the minute discourse. I think all of them I would expect to change their tuning to some degree based on changes to Critical's target and maybe to a lesser degree other less important reviewers like us.
And even in Critical situation, he's adopted DF plus slope for 5128 data as well. So there is a sense in which, I suppose that's the other side of it. I mean, in the actual process of tuning this stuff, in the first place, do you think that more folks will try and aim for 5128 DF plus tills? In the first place, given that Crin's now also publishing that data?
I think a lot of it's going to depend. I mean, again, this is maybe cynical, but I think a lot of it's going to depend on what the emphasis is in Crin's reviews. I think a lot of it's going to depend what the emphasis is in other reviews. I think that for a lot of brands that are not paying attention to the up-to-the-minute drama, like I'd be surprised to see this really change Odyssey's IEMs.
Oh, yeah, no.
Although that might be a nice thing if it did change Odyssey's IEMs.
Yes,
So
please.
that's Shankar. Really like the guy. Do not like the Euclid.
Me neither. Honestly, my bigger problem is ergonomics, though, and I hope that them having a 5128 would mean they would pay more attention to that going forward as well.
Well,
time will tell.
The other, you referenced Odyssey, but like they are. I can tell you, they definitely are aware of what, at least for over-ear headphones, what a good result is, and the Maxwell demonstrates that, right? Like they knew exactly what they were doing with that one. It shows what they. At least to me, it's a signal that when given the platform, they can do, something good. But it doesn't mean necessarily it's going to translate to IEMs, right?
Yeah.
And I think we still have yet to see.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be something where the brands that chase after a specific reviewer's recommendation, whether it's because they're doing a collab or not, are going to adapt quickly.
Yeah.
What they adapt to will depend on who they're trying to court. The brands that have very strong internal targets, are going to probably change slowly, if at all.
Like Sennheiser, for example.
Yeah, or AKG. I'd be surprised if Harman IEMs did a massive pivot until and unless there's a change from Olive's work, right?
Now,
and that's good, I think.
In the spirit of that, given that they're now doing additional preference research, or at least they're working on something, to what degree do you expect that to be different from IE 2019?
What, me?
Either of you guys.
I'm punting that one. I have no fucking clue.
Yeah, I don't have any expectations. That's why as soon as Sean announced it, I just barraged him with questions on Twitter.
So I suppose we won't know until we see it, but like if I were to conjecture, I would imagine that the delta would stay the same.
The delta between
bass to treble delta.
Between bass and treble?
Yeah.
So it depends on how we're counting it, obviously.
To over ears?
Yeah. I would imagine that it would be well, it is tough to say though, because and this is sort of what we were talking about before as well, that like with IEMs there is more variation between or how people receive them, right? And whether that's to do with people legitimately having a different or variation in preference to that degree, or if it's the whole bypassing of the pinna thing. So I'm not sure, but I don't think that like what I would sort of expect or what I imagine would happen is that maybe the shape looks a little different, but the actual like if you did bass to treble delta, it would still be within
so
10 to 12
one thing
dB.
to keep in mind also is that when we talk about those deltas, there's a bunch of different ways to count it. Like this is something that I've talked to Sean a little bit about, but he counts it based on the parameter that he's entering into the filter, right? Whereas one of the ways that I've counted it before is using the integral, the area under the curve. And those will give you different results. So these things will always have some noise. What we know is that generally speaking, people want to have a generally downward slanted response from bass to treble. That it varies a bit. Some people want a lot more bass and some people want a little more bass. And that, of course, the exact details of the experiment will change a lot about how they adjust things. E.g., in Lorho's experiment, they couldn't raise bass, so they just lowered treble a lot. In
bass,
I think it was in the 2016 one where they could only adjust bass, they adjusted bass a lot. So, yeah.
I think that brings up a good point, actually. Yeah, it's very much to do with how limited the adjustment points are.
Well, and I mean, the thing is, you're never going to have an experiment that gives us the exact perfect target curve, right? Because that's one, highly individual, and two, to get a statistically significant result with infinity options for customization would be impossible. You'd need the entire population of Earth working on it for years. That's not going to happen.
Be very noisy, boy.
Yeah. So what we have is guidelines, right? What we have is significant data points.
I mean, I would still say that there's a pretty significant difference, though, right now between IEF and Harman IE 2019, and it's one that matters, I think. And we exist in a reality where people who are very vocal about their preferences, and in the IEM communities, will tend to reject Harman IE 2019 and prefer IEF, for example, right? I think there's so many different things going on there that it's difficult to know like what folks who are reporting that actually prefer, and I would suggest that they probably on an individual basis prefer something that is neither.
Well, yeah, I mean that's like one of the major results of the Harman work, right?
Yeah,
like the average participant in any of the tests has a preference that falls near the standard deviation, because that's obviously standard deviation is 60% window, 68, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you raised a point earlier about the controls having an influence, right?
Well, the experimental design.
Yeah.
Controls are different, but yes.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean like controls in that sense. I mean like specifically what people can change.
Oh, yes, sorry, yes.
Controllable variables.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is also a sense in which you need some sort of limitations in order to come up with anything. And this was sort of Sean's point where, because I raised the idea of like, hey, well, why not in a listening experiment let people adjust bass and treble, but also let them adjust ear gain?
Like he mentioned that in his CanJam presentation.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah.
Fill me in.
He said basically verbatim that he thinks that would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah. I agree. Because that bakes in Lorho.
Lorho boys got to win that day.
Yeah.
Well, particularly given the possibly pending results, which we are not going to discuss, by the way, but of the paper that's going to be presented at AES New York, that's going to be.
Come on, we're not going to discuss it at all.
I think we can.
No, we can't, because we don't have the paper.
Right, but
I made a LinkedIn account specifically to message the author of the paper. I have not heard back from the author of the paper. No. If and when we hear back from the folks who have authored a new paper on a 5128 target curve for over-ear headphones, I would love to discuss it.
If anyone wants to ping me or Blaine privately to discuss it,
I'm
hold on, though. Hold on.
I'm not exactly thrilled with the outcome. I think the outcome is going to be.
Oh, we really can't talk about it at all because there's one thing just.
We cannot talk about it at all because we haven't read the paper. So all we have is a Zenodo link that has some files.
Well, no, we have whatever Sean said, which also is not a basis to form a discussion.
It is also not a basis for So we don't have nearly enough to comment on a paper that is unpublished.
Yeah. But one thing we can talk about, I think, just in general, nothing to do with that paper, is that it probably makes a certain amount of sense to develop the stuff with open back headphones in mind, because you're going to have an easier time with headphone transfer function.
Well, there's an interesting question to be raised there. I was talking to Constantine about this a while back, actually. But one point with the middle ear and the canal present some load of their own, right? And that is individual. If you had a perfectly low impedance IEM, just as an example, something that was, that had no acoustic output impedance, it would completely ignore that element of the individuality, right? Mm-hmm. But IEMs do have a real acoustic output impedance. So you actually do get some elements of your own canal resonance there, right? Now, how much that is actually personalizing it is variable, but there's actually a case to be made that you may actually have more preference for things that, particularly in that band where things vary a lot, maybe over 2K, higher acoustic impedance might actually produce a more preferred result or a more consistently heard result because it will be closer to the individual ear in that respect. Don't really know that that's true. That's just a conjecture, but on paper it makes sense.
Though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know
then
how
what happens when you're not only using closebacks, but using closebacks that could be using DSP in the pressure band to regularize the response.
Yep.
Well, I mean, in that case, you might actually end up with something
you're giving
could be optimal. What?
The paper.
I didn't say anything about a paper.
No, I mean, like, this could just be talking about any...
It's true, yeah.
So if we're talking about ANC, right, ANC lowers acoustic... We're getting off topic, but ANC lowers acoustic output impedance in the band.
Acoustic impedance is always on topic. Go on.
Where it's in play. So there is a scenario, and again, conjecture, and recently I saw a talk by Axel Grell, which took the exact opposite position, and I can see where he's coming from as well. But there is a scenario where it actually could be that people preferred more closed headphones that had ANC to a fully open design when all else was equal.
Interesting.
Now, that's testable and something to be tested, but not in any way confirmed, so please do not run with that.
Yeah. Somebody eventually will.
Yeah.
I'll kill them.
I mean, test it. Ideally, not run with this as nothing but...
if they do, I'll kill them.
Yeah, okay. Just Blaine wakes up and chooses violence. It's sort of what happens.
I mean, today I woke up and there was a stream happening. I got up like 10 minutes before the stream. I'm living the true streamer life.
So we're getting your full expression of violence. Joel Merrifield says, "I think you are wrong at Blaine Lacrosse."
I mean,
I don't know about what.
No, that's just a fair statement in general.
Morally, like,
sure.
Well, I don't think that's fair.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what it's about. Okay, so let's get.
Someone actually asked something, and I'd really like to answer because I want to know the answer.
So
are
right
we
now,
measuring the Midgard?
Questions. Let's go for questions, and we'll answer them. And spicy stuff as well. Spicy hour has effectively begun. Will we be measuring? Will we be getting and measuring the Midgard? So, my thought there would be yes. However, they are also, I believe, somewhat backed up with orders. So it's more a question of when rather than if. So I don't know when.
I mean, I feel like, not to sound privileged, but I feel like we should get priority. I mean, like, we actually have the measurement gear.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But, he put out that statement about anybody with the measurement rig being able to get one, and suddenly everyone with clone couplers are rushing to the.
Well, fuck! I'll message.
Yeah, go for it. Let's get one in. I don't know when that's going to be, but I would love to see Cameron check it out with the AP. And
well, of course, the substantive point there is that you want to look at the
headphone measurements.
Yeah, distortions.
Yeah. I think that would be very cool. I don't know how much I care about an amplifier reducing headphone measurements, except in situations like if it can make a meaningful difference for like an HD600 or something like that, so I can EQ it more. In the bass.
Okay, so but the thing is, I mean, okay, to be fair, no one here cares about amplifier distortion to any meaningful extent because it matters when it becomes audible and subjectively problematic, which is basically at clipping.
So you can change the threshold potentially of where that is for certain headphones, then that's great. But if we're talking like, tiny little bit that on paper is like, yes, it makes a difference. I don't know how much.
I mean, servo subs have a reason to exist, and I could see this being helpful. You're probably not going to get a large benefit from it, but I could see this being helpful for open headphones.
Right. But, and for all those people who think that detail is distortion, we're just, getting rid of all the detail. I see. Said distortion is timbre.
Amber comes from trees. So, hold on a second. We actually do have a question. We actually have several questions.
Yes.
Also, someone is complaining that ASCII is complaining that we ignored all of ASCII's questions. Ask them again then.
Yeah. So we're now looking at the chat after we've gone over the shape of IEMs to come article.
Okay. Why did Harman opt to use measured in-room instead of measured or calculated diffuse field, and what are the differences there? So we'll do a video where I'll show the exact difference for the pinna that they used and in the Keymar to their in-room thing. Substantively, the differences are not super large, but the reason was because their experiment wasn't just about a preferred headphone target. It was about a preferred target for headphones and speakers, and one of the major results of listener preferences for in-room loudspeaker and headphone targets is that people prefer roughly the same thing for both headphones and speakers, right? You can't do that if you're doing the DF thing unless you acknowledge that DF is the analogous condition for listening to headphones versus listening to speakers in a mixed sound field in a room, which gets deeper into the Gunter Thiel theory stuff than Sean wanted to. He just wanted something...
Yep.
He wanted something that was empirically testable and that was directly doable. And I think it was a very practical solution to test and to prove, actually, that what people want in speakers and headphones is generally the same. And I think that was a really important result.
Yeah, I think it's worth... I do think it's worth, like, solidly establishing the DF thing is more specific for headphones, given the teal stuff.
Yeah, and I will say, DF versus the in-room flat, the differences are smaller than the differences between some units of the same headphone.
Yeah.
Like, at the level of smoothing that they did, there are not a lot of... And particularly because they used several different incidence angles, there is not a lot of difference. There is difference, but there is not a lot of it.
Right.
And that's due to the in-room being, like, reflected or indirect sound dominant, right?
Well, it's a mixture of that it's partially dominated by indirect sound and also that they averaged multiple incidence angles. Like, if you think about it, if you do a power average, like, that's how we get DF, right? We just do a power average of a bunch of free field incidences. And they only did, I think, 7 in the 2017 paper, or 2012 paper, and 3 in the 2013. But that combined with being decent ways away from the speakers, decently live room, you do get, and then smoothing it so you lose the small peaks and dips, you get something that's much closer to DF.
Now, here's a really dumb question for you. Because I'm sure there's a simple answer. So you know how we talk about using population average for the pinna for IEMs with, and it makes sense because we're bypassing the pinna.
Yep.
Now I can't remember if it was Oratory who suggested that this might be a distinction without a difference in practice, because we're talking about, like, let's say we're aiming for something with an average ear. Wouldn't that be close enough?
Well, empirically, the answer is no.
Right. So which is why we're wanting to take Joel's suggestion here. So thank you for that suggestion, by the way, Joel, of going with population average, because I also tend to agree that makes sense. But in the spirit of that, is there any reason why we wouldn't go with population average for a torso with over-ear headphones?
Well, yeah, because the ear is actually contributing to the measurement.
Yeah,
like,
right, but if you're talking about a DF-HRTF from a hats, I suppose that is part of the distinction between headphones and speakers.
Yeah, so when we talk about compensating data, there was an interesting sort of shift that happened, and it happened at some point that I'm not really sure of, because it was after I got into the hobby, but it wasn't that long after, where we moved from, we want to compensate headphone data to make it more like speaker data, right? Basically treating it sort of like a calibration file, to we compensate it to a target response. Part of that obviously is Harman, and obviously there's a lot of good side effects to Harman. Part of that, I think, is that people had a habit of EQing just to match, just to flatten the line, and that never sounded good, particularly because Most of the lines weren't even DF. They were independent of direction, which was even worse.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I've lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Where did I start with this?
Talking about subtracting the Hat's pinna from
Well, it's mainly
yes.
Yeah.
So the logic there was we have a device that we're testing with, right? And you can trace this back to microphones. Your microphone. Actually, I have one. This microphone has a relatively flat frequency response, right? But it's not perfect. It has a calibration that was done against a reference microphone, which is flatter still. And then I can apply that calibration file, which is just the inverse of the difference, and I get something closer to the truth, right? Like I'm trying to compensate away some of the effects of this device. And that holds for pretty much every type of microphone that isn't like the reference laboratory standard microphones. That's probably something that, in my view at least, we should do with head and torso simulators as well, right? Like what we care about is the effect of the device under test, excluding as much of the device that's testing it as possible.
Right.
Same reason that we compensate in an oscilloscope while we have a compensation capacitor to compensate for cable capacitance. So, all this to say, when the ear is in play, you probably want to be compensating for that ear. When the ear isn't in play, the question of what you compensate for should probably default towards the average, in my view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the reason why this sort of just piqued my curiosity was in the spirit of making headphone, basically being able to compare headphones to speakers.
Well, in that capacity, that's where my interpretation of the DF-HRTF and of this, like, did the live just go down? Or no, that's just my computer being stupid.
Looks fine to me.
Everything's good.
Yeah. But that's where the DF-HRTF gives you a direct analogy and experience, because you have, in speakers, you have a localizable sound source, so your brain is using basically, and actually, I have a test we should be doing for this at some point next time we do a live show. I thought of this. If you have someone turn their head while you're talking to them, and then you turn your head while talking to them, obviously the directivity of your mouth isn't precisely the same as the directivity of the ear, but the difference in timbre between someone turning their head while talking to you and you turning your head the same amount while they're talking to you, which will have tens of dB of swing in the treble response, is really a noticeable difference to highlight how significantly timbre is tied to where we localize things in space.
I mean, this is the most fascinating thing in sound in my mind.
Yep.
Like this is
Teal's paper broke my brain.
Yeah, same. And I keep bringing it up because it's still in there. But yeah, I mean I always like to make visual analogies because I think human beings are more visually oriented creatures. But it really is like, being able to distinguish an apparent object from a tangible object, right? So like a two-dimensional visual field into what we know to be a three-dimensional one. That's sort of how I think about it. And I think with sound, it does the same thing with localization, where the apparentness of it being at an angle at a certain distance meaningfully affects the interpretation of FR at the eardrum.
So that actually makes me think of something that Sean posted on Twitter, which was
we can talk about that if you want.
He posted, and it's not about the study we're not going to talk about. It was about a study that was published a while ago, in 2018. It was a perceptual evaluation of individual and non-individual HRTFs, a case study of the SADI2 database.
The one where people preferred the KU100 rather.
Well, Blaine had a good explanation for that.
Yes.
Blaine did?
I thought you commented on it.
I mean, I commented on it.
Yeah, I don't think it was an explanation of why, but regardless, that's not why I was bringing it up. I thought it was interesting that because you bring up how the spatial interpretation of a certain FR can change how we digest the FR as a, I guess, preferential element. I thought it was interesting that they noted a correlation, or the most positive correlation in their testing was between a headphone's externalization and preference.
Oh,
Like
so what
they
you're
tested
yeah.
correlation between a few different things, and preference and externalization was the most positively preferred.
Externalization and richness.
And richness, which by the way,
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, need some more richness
Yeah.
in my IEMs.
Exactly. Richness is the missing 300 to 800 hertz.
Yeah, well, richness could also be reduced ear gain a la Lorho.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, what is your take on that then, Blaine?
What, on the finding?
Well, so my thought process there, and I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but it was that maybe people were sort of prioritizing the binauralness of it over the subjective preference, but I or over the balance, right? But I also think of the teal stuff with that, because if suddenly you're getting sound that is not in the typical sort of stereo recording way that you would normally get, with headphones, if that on its own has the effect of, well, a similar effect essentially to an apparent sound source. But I don't know, Blaine, if you have a different sort of thought there.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think that Sean has the best explanation. If you look in the thread, one of the things he points out is that he's done experiments that were similar and didn't yield the same result. And the distinction is that they had a reference. So when people had the reference point of real sound, they preferred the binaural impulse response of their own ears.
Yeah, that makes sense.
However, in the case where people preferred the KU100, people did not have a reference. They were just doing a blind, A, B, C, D, which do you prefer comparison. And that could highlight where a lack of a reference can sway the result. Now, you might also say, well, hold on, people don't have a reference when they're listening to music, and that's also a significant thing and worth testing. So it's not like this is a bad result or a bad methodology, but I think that this may be a methodological effect.
Well, but this
is why we care about methodology, and this is why we're not going to talk about the paper that hasn't been published yet.
But this is also why I highly value EQ in the evaluative process, where it does give you that reference point. I mean, it can. It depends on what you do with it, obviously. But it does a better job of indicating how something sounds relative to normal, let's say.
Yeah, like if you have your normal already. Yeah. Like
I mean, you can do it with other
A lot of people don't know what their normal is.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's interesting.
Yeah, you can do it with other headphones. Like you can grab a K371 or something, right? And you can swap or whatever. But I think you can do even better than that. So.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of other questions that we haven't been getting to.
Yeah, actually, I wanna answer ASCII or ACII's question. She said, with the shape of IEMs to come, are there any brands that we notice are stagnating, or are there brands that haven't stagnated and have shown that they are progressing in concert with the changes shown by the 5128? I did briefly mention this, and I do feel like I want to give Blaine a little bit of credit here, because he said this on a prior live stream. Audiophiles might be the problem, because the consumer brands are actually... The consumer market is better at weeding out the bad sounding options than audiophiles are.
Audiophiles are definitely the problem in many respects. This is one of them.
And this is definitely one of them, because if you look at like Apple's, obviously the AirPods Pro 2, the Samsung Galaxy Buds, Sony's IEMs, they all measure with the appropriate richness in the low mid range that we were talking about.
Even the Samsung ones?
Yeah, interestingly, so the Buds Pro 1 and the Pro 2 both are more 5128E than Harman E.
Interesting.
It is interesting, and I don't really know what is behind that, because I know they've had a 5128 for a while, but I didn't get the impression it was something they used in product development.
Right.
So it's interesting. Whereas obviously the audiophile IEMs that even came out after that stuff haven't really adhered to that. as far as brands that are stagnating, I mean, I don't want to call out any specifics, but
Do it, coward.
See, he chose violence.
I always
Blaine
choose
always chooses
violence.
violence.
See?
I don't
on the
know, 'cause
internet said,
I don't
I
know,
think that Blaine
what's
must
under
be
the.
nicer in person once, and I was so amused.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I remember you reacting to that. Yeah, I don't know what's currently in development for these brands, so I don't know if I'm going to eat my words in a few months. I would say in terms of brands that seemingly are paying attention, to come to mind. The first is perhaps obviously Truthier,
Yes.
who, even if they're, obviously with Hexa doing the kind of under 1K thing, with Red and Nova, it seems like they're paying more attention to the stuff over 1K, which subjectively has worked very well for me. And I think has worked well for a lot of people too. I think a lot of people are going to like the new Nova because of that. Of course, remains to be seen. There are only like 2 units out there owned by people right now, I think.
So I also have one that I think is probably going to be doing similar things, because they already kind of have been, just for the not in the upper frequencies, but Symphonium.
Yes. So this is one situation where I consider them friends and have dialogue with members of Symphonium and other associated brands. So yeah, I've definitely been in their ear, bothering them a little bit about it.
And your article on the Crimson is now live as well. And just shout out to that article, which is a fairly critical take, I would say. And I also...
It's interesting. Most of the people who saw my impressions beforehand and then read the article expected me to be a lot harsher.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I read the article and I thought, I can see exactly why you're saying what you're saying about it. I personally have a more positive valence towards it, but I think you're absolutely right about the treble.
Yeah. And anecdotally, that has been the thing that most people have noted as an issue thus far.
Anyways, sorry to cut you off there. Other
brands? There is actually one other brand I did want to mention that I think we might see some surprising product from in the future. But it depends on, I guess, what sort of target methodology they end up adopting, because I think they only just recently got a 5128. Theo actually is confirmed to have a 5128. They released 5128 measurements to an enthusiast. I actually think it was Chromka. I could be wrong, but and it was like properly formatted, like Excel spreadsheet data.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
I mean, and
I'm
there's
very interested to see where that goes.
And then for the brands that are not going to be doing this, do you think, or not quick to adopt? Feel free to throw them under the bus. Just go for it.
All right. I think the audio.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Speculation.
I don't know what y'all's communication with the audio is like. I've yet to really like any of their products, even though some of their older ones are actually pretty compliant in the mids.
They are.
I think they're one of the firms that is still tuning with 711 for treble extension. And that's what I would see as like the main limiting factor for them, and frankly many other firms.
What do you think about Moondrop? Because Moondrop has that same kind of tuning for many of their IEMs.
So it really depends on how seriously they take whatever Crin says.
Right.
And I could very well see them changing course based on whatever Crin says. But, and I don't want to throw Crin under the bus here or anything, but I feel like Crin's messaging could be a little bit clearer about what he sees as, or what he's judging things against currently.
Well, but if he's also making collabs with people, I mean, it's kind of leading the dance, right?
It is, yeah. And I'm not going to comment on that element. Yeah. But I think as someone who has obviously talked to Crin about this, and, him doing the 2023 target was, it was basically just me bugging him in DMs to make it so that his 2 databases were compatible.
Right.
Or somewhat compatible.
Right.
I have seen some of the products he's working on secretly, like some of the 5128 measurements of his products in development, and they look good. I want him to move to population average.
I think we all need to move to that. That's
Yeah, which means we need
there's
block
a strong
scale
argument for it.
5128.
I will say there is a
DF.
pushback argument on it, which is that you need to have the canal transfer function separate from the rest of the transfer function to do that.
I mean, I would agree with that. But
So
do we have a way to get that easily?
yeah, it just adds an extra step from the perspective of other people adopting it if they have different rigs. It's not a huge issue.
it messes with some of the compatibility stuff.
Well, no, I mean, in theory, it should improve compatibility with the caveat of people actually have to have that data. Now,
yeah,
you
they
can
have
for
to do it,
7-Eleven, you can get that from Hammershoy and Muller, assuming your device is compliant. But yeah, anyway, it's basically I'm wanting to say there are reasonable contentions that would have at least some burden on people adopting it.
Right.
More so than DF.
Right. Which seems to be what people have run with. Like, it's, I mean, critical in particular. But it seems like I've seen it now in many places that, you know, tilted DF is sort of it's risen out of the reviewer targets to be the thing, to a certain extent.
Yes, and I would like to move us away from that, but that's a separate discussion.
You just moved us to that, man. Come on.
No, you moved us to that. I said that we should go to flat DF the whole goddamn time.
And you know that that's what we're doing, so.
Yes, I do, and that's what we're moving to.
He's aware. Yes. Yeah, I would actually take some of the accountability for that. As far as the tilted DF.
Actually, also
ubiquitous reviewer target.
We can also lay the blame at Chocomil's feet. He still prefers tilted DF, so you know.
Oh, like as the flat compensation.
Yeah.
It's not fair to blame Choco. He's
honestly
not even a human. He's just a bird.
What I blame is Phil in chat saying Choco smell.
I mean, if you understand, if you're following this stuff reasonably closely, it does end up being a distinction without a difference. You just lose some of the benefits and the elegance, right? But as far as like the actual data itself and what you're reading, you know.
Yeah. I mean, you lose a bit of sign illusion. You gain a little bit of
yes, exactly. Yeah, but you have sign illusion regardless. Now,
I mean, we could make a visualization that was less prone to that. I have thought about that before, but.
Somebody was saying, I think it was even Kjerk saying that compensated is stinky.
Well, yeah, that's a terrible take, but that's anyway. So if we're getting back to addressing chat things, we have like 7 million questions that just didn't pay attention to.
Let's go. Let's hit it.
Blaine, moderate. Come on, we need you.
Yeah, I'm bad at reading the chat because I'm also reading levels. Let's go.
I see.
I just don't know how to read, so I need.
So arguably, we've answered Senor C asking, why do you prefer compensated graphs to uncompensated? Maybe I'm old school, but I always like to see the real data, not just in audio measurements. The two reasons are basically, one, different fixtures will have different HRTFs. So imagine if you measured a speaker with a 5128 and a 45 CA or whatever, they would measure differently, even though that would actually just be reflecting the difference of those fixtures. So we do want to avoid that to an extent. But more pertinently, the sign illusion means that when you have overlapping curves that sort of swoop up and down, people are very bad at approximating how much they differ. Like really bad, and we can prove this.
Yeah, so that'll be in an upcoming video.
I was going to say, we should have content.
I've already filmed it, so it's in the works. Good. Yeah.
Boris says, how are you planning to get the population average data? Thankfully, that we already have plenty of. There is actually a fair amount of it, including in the ISO. Oh, shoot. Which ISO is it? It's the
11294?
Well, you're talking about population average for 7-Eleven.
No, that is not it at all.
It's
11904.
Yes, 11904. No, wait, 11904 is.
Hold on, are you talking for 7-Eleven or are you talking for 5 and 2A?
I'm talking for humans.
For humans, population average. Okay.
Yeah.
So Dorte Hammershoy and Henrik Muller did a paper back in 2008, which formed the basis of the ISO standard. which basically looked at a whole bunch of data on human HRTFs from different studies. And there are subsequent studies that we could fold in, but in general, there's not too much disagreement. Like, we have a pretty good idea of what the average human HRTF looks like.
As far as applying that, though, to DF-HRTF for 711, that seems fairly straightforward. But...
Well, yeah, you take the block canal and you add the canal transfer function.
You would just do the same thing. Would you apply it the same way to the 5128?
Well, I mean,
there's a little more math.
Yeah,
but
the only thing is that we need to get the canal transfer function to the 5128.
Yeah,
and the canal transfer function of the 5128 is just the block canal response minus the mic response of the block canal mic minus the eardrum response. So yeah, no, it's doable. The main thing is you need to have a well-characterized probe mic.
Based on Joel's math that I've seen, or one of the results at least, it would be a little bit lower above 5K. Is that correct?
Yes.
That I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe Griffin.
Definitely.
I believe it's lower above 5K, which makes sense.
I would say lower above 3K.
Means I'm closer to population average.
And I may be an outlier. And it's important to acknowledge that there are outliers, and for them, sorry, this is just addressing a question we just got, which is, since headphones are outside the ears and IEMs are in the canal, do IEMs need different tuning to account for the missing transfer function of sound traveling into the ear? The answer is depends on where you measure, right? So if you measure at the eardrum, the answer is no. The transfer function that matches the HRTF is the right one. But different people have different HRTFs, and parts of that are in here. And the IEM obviously can't see this. So there's probably more variation in terms of what the exact details, the high frequencies people would prefer with IEMs than there is with headphones.
So if you have an ear such that the DF-HRTF is more energy at 5K or whatever, like above 5K, you would want a different product than
most likely, or to EQ it.
Yeah.
Like in the end, the best solution is really just to have users become familiar with EQ or to have automatic EQs, but that's unfortunately a ways off.
Been saying this for a while. No, we gotta put the tone controls on the headphones, like what Sean wants.
I mean
that would be great too.
Why haven't we?
Actually, there are IEMs with some, but it's usually just for the bass, right?
Yeah, just make better tone controls parts of your. I mean, God, instead of shoving 7 bajillion drivers and an electrostatic tweeter, just give me tone controls.
There was one where it just shut off the BA drivers for the treble. It was the Dunu Talos. Yeah. But the problem is that the overall IEM itself was already too bright. So it went from being bright to just insane. And then you could toggle off the insanity. And it would still be just kind of bright.
Well, that's not great.
Yeah. Or at least I think that's what was going on, right? I think it was the BA drivers that you could just toggle off. But at least that's a start. I mean, that's, having some sort of customizability is nice. But I also think it's probably easier to do that for the bass.
Okay, let's see. We have another question from Oris. B&K used MRI, if I remember correctly. How are you planning to get the data specifically? We are not planning on getting any canal geometry data. We are simply going to be getting acoustic response data. So we don't need MRIs. Kirka says, at listener, why has the general audio community fallen into the scientific language game of the science of sound rather than leaving that to those who do it professionally? Does acoustic impedance matter to the average listener?
Sorry,
I don't know why he's subtweeting listener with this. That's also applicable to.
Clarification on that question is needed. Does knowledge of acoustic impedance matter to the average listener, or is he saying?
I have to assume that he means the words acoustic impedance and the information that can be conveyed by them. Obviously, the real effect matters, but it's sort of like saying, oh, do you really care about dielectric breakdown, or do you care that the chord that you picked up just zapped you? You don't care about dielectric breakdown. You care that you got zapped.
Well, this is where my dilettante level understanding forces me to fall back on examples I know. And when it comes to an example I know, it matters insofar as a consumer is making a choice that could be affected by that, right? And I feel like clear example I put forth was the 8XX 800 example. When the 8XS was discontinued and people on Reddit were asking, oh my God, it's like only $700 or whatever. Should I buy it? Like, there's a reasonable case that you should educate them for why they probably shouldn't.
I tend to think I tend to agree. I feel it's probably difficult to do en masse.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I don't think the question was like, is it feasible or easy or?
Well, I think part of the question is, do people need to know why? And the question there is basically, how much do people trust us, right? Like, we tell people the why instead of just the what, in part because that's a way of
totally, yeah.
The first part of the
trust.
question, yeah.
The what is because things will sound different to you under some circumstances than the measurements might indicate.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean we have to tell you about acoustic impedance, but if we just say, oh, the measurements might mislead you, you would pretty reasonably distrust us, I think.
I have a slightly adjacent rant to this, which is basically to also piggyback off of the notion that listener mentioned earlier, which is that audiophiles are the problem. I think that audiophiles are the problem for multiple reasons. One of them is that we, because I would include myself in this, constantly conflate descriptions of the experience with real acoustic properties.
Yes,
I saw it in the chat twice already.
There's been
you'll see it many more times before the stream is over.
Yeah,
who's been talking a lot about speed? Yes.
Yeah. And I was just ranting about this on Reddit recently, where it happened again, and it made me think like it was basically the idea of like, well, Soundstage, it's a real thing, right? Like, and I'm like, well, okay, but frequency response and like psychoacoustics, let's talk about that. But more importantly, I think that the issue is that people see a graph and it doesn't indicate necessarily what their experience is, and then take that immediately to say, well, then the graph is frequency. It can't be the frequency response explains this, but in reality, it probably does. It's just that there is an effect like what's going on with the 8XX that is responsible, right? Where they're not, their eardrum is not necessarily what they see on the graph. And so I actually think that to go a little further here, I think it does the hobby a disservice when we constantly make this sort of conflation, because it's not that being able to explain something in terms of frequency response in any respect diminishes, hey Joel, in any respect diminishes people's subjective experiences. And I feel like people are treating it as if it does. Sorry. Oh,
we have added a new challenger has appeared,
but he has not accepted.
Yes, please.
Well, okay.
Oh, he's grabbing a mic.
Okay.
So we'll be having a new entrant who's been in the chat very actively. That's Joel Merrifield. I do want to give Kirka a space for a second. First, he says, "What layer of depth is the scientific language in the scientific language game does the average user need to be?" Man, that sentence is a language game. But I think that it's a salient point, though. Like, the question is, how much do we need to talk in jargon? And from my point of view, the answer depends a lot on how much faith people are going to place in us, right? Like, if people unconditionally trusted us, which they shouldn't, we could just tell them just the facts, man. The less people are willing to unconditionally trust us, which is good, again, the more we need to explain the why so that they can verify what we're saying, right? Because if we say something simply is the case, then people have a much harder time debunking it than if we give a causal account, which may well be wrong. And that's the thing. We are imperfect. Everyone is imperfect. And sometimes when we make these statements, if we just said, oh, this simply is the case, it creates the problem of, and there's a name for this law, but it's exponentially harder to debunk bullshit than it is to propagate it. The more specific, the more specific you are in what you're claiming, the easier it is for people to address your claims. So to some degree, it's a self-accountability thing.
Yeah. I do think there comes a point though where, we've certainly lost the plot many times, specifically because of getting into the why of it more so than the what of it, right? When people don't necessarily care about the why of it, where we've done the job of being like, yeah, no, like we have looked into this or whatever, right?
Wait, but the thing is, we also have lost the plot because we've had some incorrect.
Yes,
like,
absolutely,
conclusions.
absolutely.
One of them may even be in a paper.
Yeah.
But so,
here he is.
Hello.
Joel,
What's up,
welcome.
man? You're a little quiet, bud.
Oh, okay, yeah. I am literally speaking into a UMic 1, so that might be the problem.
Blessed.
Wow, perfectly flat response.
I don't know if this is gonna improve. For folks who are unaware, Joel is one of our community members.
He's a buddy.
Yeah.
Yes, he's a very good friend
and generally good person. I assume.
Okay, is that a little better?
A little bit. I'm just gonna raise your volume for myself.
Okay, yeah.
Same. So, what did you want to add in here?
Oh, I mean, there's like so many things that you guys have talked about where I've wanted to get my 2 cents in that we'd have to backtrack significantly. So, yeah, let's
Go
not
for
do
it.
that.
Do whatever you want, man. We're chilling.
I can't even remember. It's probably the most pressing one. I'm very confused by Blaine's suggestion that having some significant output impedance in an IEM might be a desirable thing from an individual variation standpoint. I'd like to hear him elaborate on that, but that might be getting a little too into the weeds here.
That is pretty into the weeds. I'm up for it. I want to address something that this guy Isa keeps saying in chat first.
Yeah.
So, Isa has been repeatedly asking about the time domain as a separate thing from the frequency domain.
But we do this every time.
We do this every time. We will beatings will continue until morale improves. So, in a linear time invariant system, the time domain and the frequency domain are inherently connected. Any phase shift that we observe is necessarily reciprocally reflected in a change in the magnitude response. The only cases where we're going to see something in time and not see it in the frequency domain is if either A, it falls outside of our analysis window, which means that we're not doing a long enough Fourier transform, or B, the system is like nonlinear and time variant. And again, even then, you could potentially just do a series of Fourier transforms, but that's a separate matter. Like at that point, you can have a measurable difference between the system states depending on when it happened. And echo is a good example of this. If I measure a speaker in a room that echoes, the first measurement, let's say it's before all the echoes arrive, will look different than the second measurement, which is having echoes mixed in. This doesn't happen with headphones, and we can verify that because we can look at the actual degree of excess phase that exists in headphones. And when there is no significant excess phase, they are minimum phase. And when they are minimum phase, the frequency domain predicts the time domain. So, I actually did a panel about this, or a seminar chunk at CanJam, basically explaining yes, errors can be nonlinear, and nonlinear distortion is also something we can measure. And for headphones, nonlinear distortion is quite low. So in general, yes, it is measurable, and if it does come up, we will tell people about it. But it is almost always a nothing burger to talk about the time domain as something unrelated to or separate from the frequency response for headphones.
Except for decorative waterfalls.
I'll kill you. I'll kill you.
Yeah, and like, just so we're clear, I don't think when audiophiles refer to things like speed or like fast bass or anything like that, I don't think they're referring to errors in the linear time invariant system.
But they think they are.
I think, yeah, that's the problem. Point that Andrew has raised several times, and rightly, people.
You think they are?
People attribute the perception.
Oh, they attribute it, but that's not actually what.
Yeah, because yes. For them, they're like, well, the frequency response does not. It doesn't reveal to me. It doesn't show me, the experience that I'm having of this speed thing, right? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily considering that it actually may in fact be responsible for it. I mean,
Right.
it is
Like
responsible
to that,
for it.
to that, the rude part of me just wants to say skill issue, but the
no,
smart part of me wants to say it's
I
probably
don't.
something to do with deviation.
It's understandable. It's understandable because it's like if you're looking at, for example, perfectly flat bass extension, right? Like a lot of planar magnetic headphones have. That let's suppose that that's responsible for this, right? Like maybe there's something else, but like that's a pretty reasonable conjecture. If you're coming at this stuff new and you see a graph like that, what about that graph tells you that that's going to be your experience, you know, of speed and all this stuff? So I think people are they're mixing this stuff up because what they're seeing on the graph is unsatisfying when it comes to, you know, connecting it to their experience. And so that's why they're looking for other things. And then when they see some examples that correlate with, you know, what their mentally written experience is, they jump to time domain stuff because it's an additional thing.
Yeah,
but,
like
you know,
it's a set of vocabulary that people are using to describe their subjective experience. And I agree. I think that like there's not a lot that you can tell from the graph in the bass that is going to tell you what your subjective experience of that bass is going to be.
Yep.
Because in my own sort of just experimentation, I think a lot of what we think of as being in the bass is actually in the treble.
100%.
But treble is
God
just really
bless
hard
you, Joel.
for us to like it's very hard to describe your experience of treble. And so time domain gives people a vocabulary that they can use to talk about that.
Maybe an even more obvious example to this is the HD800S or the HD800 effect with the mid-range scoop and the treble boost, right? What about that on a graph tells you that it's going to be a spacious experience? But nothing. And so people think, well, there's got to be something else than what the graph shows here. I think that's
also, there is to be said, this is also something where Axel had a bit about, he thinks that it's not just that, he thinks that it's also the loading of the ear.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Listening with drivers firing from the bottom. Isn't that what his new headphones designed with, like the driver?
It's like from the front and slightly down.
Yeah, but I think,
which, like, I mean, when you hear it, it is a very spacious headphone. It's just it has other issues.
Its frequency response needs substantial correction.
Yeah.
And so
anyway,
this actually has adjacency to what Joel was asking about. If we want to go into that thread,
sure. Yeah.
So Joel, can you rearticulate what's the bone you're in here to pick?
So I guess my question is how does acoustic impedance relate to sort of like the response in situ adapting to the user's what the person's brain expects to hear? Because if I have speakers, like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the effective acoustic impedance of speakers in my room is negligible, and so. But yet the speakers perfectly adapt to my body's natural head-related transfer function. So why would having some effect from output impedance in an IEM be desirable? I'm just sort of using speakers as sort of like the boundary condition here. That's the best case scenario.
Well, one thing to consider here, obviously, is that your ears are not just a pressure detector mounted on the outside of your head. They're connected to a horn, right? And that does... There is basically a series of impedances between the drum and the outside. But consider a scenario where you have a perfectly zero output impedance device, right? And you put it on an ear simulator. And I can actually sim this if we want to, but I don't think anyone cares. The response will be flat, right? And it'll be flat because if it has a completely zero, assuming it was located right at the ear simulator, no canal, etc. It'll be perfectly flat, even though the ear simulator has its own like canal load, because if it has zero output impedance, it's completely load invariant. So a zero impedance source next to your ear will not account for the variation of your own ear Z, which includes things like the stiffness of your eardrum and the mass of your eardrum and the bones that are connected to it. Although I've been told that the bones matter less than people have told me before, so I'm not sure how much that actually matters. If anyone wants to have their mastoid process removed so we can test that, I'd be happy to try that. No? All right, fair enough. Anyway,
I'll think about it.
So this is to say, if you had a zero output impedance IEM, and it was equalized to be flat, obviously, and it was right next to your eardrum, it would have a perfectly flat response, acoustically flat at the eardrum, which isn't what you want. So there is an element here where if you have something in your ear, and this is probably mostly academic, right? Like any of these things is not going to be a perfectly massless source, right? These things do have acoustic impedance. But in a scenario where you had the option between a ultra low or zero acoustic output impedance and a higher acoustic output impedance, there's a scenario where the former would give you a less individual response because it would ignore the individuality of the ear load. Whereas with a meaningful source impedance, obviously you have the ear load factored because you are getting closer to a metaphoric current source, which varies the voltage, which is sound pressure, in proportion to the magnitude of the impedance facing it.
Okay, yeah. That I'll need to think about that for a bit to wrap my brain around that. But I guess that makes sense. Yeah, like obviously if you're getting flat at the eardrum, that's bad.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, you had flat at the eardrum to start with, and you EQ it, but it's completely independent of the drum load, and the drum load differs between people. Then now you have a timbre problem.
Yeah, I guess when we think about this, I guess sort of as a follow-up question, how much is the drum load going to be changing our HRTF in the free field? Like if I have a loudspeaker in front of me, how much does my eardrum load affect the end result that I get?
Well, I mean, one simple way to test this, obviously, would be to, and I'm assuming here that we're counting everything inwards of, the reference plane as part of the drum's load. Yeah. Would be just to look at the difference between a sound quality type mannequin, which has a short canal but no ear sim, and a normal dummy head, right? And you might say, oh, well, why is there a difference in response? Because obviously, if it's coming from free air, it should be a low impedance source. And the best metaphor I have for you here is that it's not in free air once it's going through a tube, but there may be folks who are more inclined to deal with the impedance metaphor at greater depth who can argue with me on that one. Constantine might be one of them, but that's the metaphor I go with, is that once you're in the ear or anywhere where there are standing waves, etc., you are not in a free air zero impedance condition to begin with. So there will always be, it's just that we usually think of the entirety of the transfer impedance that happens inside the ear separate from the source, right? Which is fair. Like if you think about like think about a higher order filter, right? Or even just a first order filter that's like RC. We think about the inputs before the first resistor. But obviously, if there wasn't that resistor, then a zero impedance source wouldn't produce any drop with a capacitor. It would just have infinite, current at whatever frequency.
Okay, so that's a good answer.
How much do people need to know this?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. This is firmly in the Kirka would be right that people do not care about this domain. I just want to talk about this with Joel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people need to know this to the extent that they enjoy knowing this. Like, and this is what I said in chat, is that it's something to do in the audio hobby that isn't just buying things. Like people love listening to new headphones, but there's a reasonable limit to what each person can actually listen to in a year. But they still enjoy thinking about these things. They enjoy participating in the audio conversation around these things. And so if you like the science, that's just part of the audio hobby for you.
I've been going down that path for so long to try and find something that is interesting to people in this hobby beyond just what should my next purchase be, or is this good or bad, because
my next purchase is going to be a 5128. No, I'm joking.
No, you're not.
No,
we'll help you. We'll help you crowdfund for it.
I mean, if you guys want to crowdfund it,
it's a lot.
Quite a bit.
You just come up here and use ours. But yeah,
What to do?
One of the things that I don't enjoy doing is giving, like anecdotal purchase recommendations. Even putting together tier lists and things like that it's an exercise in frustration for me, because I feel like it's reductive to what is potentially interesting in this space. But that is also what people want. I've seen seemingly this is what, where the demand is. And I think for most people there probably is that like, hey, I want to get some new headphones, something good, or I want to level up my experience. What do I get? And then they'll look towards, those who are experienced in the space, be it Critical or me or whoever else, right? And then once they get their conclusion or whatever it is, then they basically ignore the rest of the hobby there on out, and they're better for it. There is a sense in which they're better for it, because if they're no longer paying attention to this, then they don't get sucked into maybe getting something else, right, or another thing, or even more stuff. And certainly they get saved from a lot of squabbles online about this stuff. But
no, the best play is to not interact on forums about audio. Just enjoy what you enjoy.
Yeah.
Read what you want to read.
But
if you ever find yourself feeling like I want to post something, that's when you leave.
But see, here's the thing. Here's the thing. To Joel's point, these are the kinds of things that I wish people were more interested in, so that there would be more incentive. Well, so that there'd be more demand. And I'd be able to get into stuff that's more interesting than doing, tier lists or recommendation, purchase advice or whatever, right?
Although those things are actually much more useful to people.
Yeah.
Well,
those are the things that allow people to get out.
Yes and no. I think yes, if people's preferences align with mine, or if people are willing to judge the graph in a way that maybe we think is reasonable. But no, if people say, for example, if people have preferences closer to Blaine's, or listeners even with the 24 dB
That's
targets.
horrifying. Yeah.
It's very difficult to do that, because you're never gonna.
This meme needs to die.
Yeah, well, I can tell people what I like the best, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna like it the best. And also, this gets a little bit to the recent video about HRTF variation and stuff like that. I'm not sure if it was Joel who raised this. It may have been Joel. It may have been you, actually, listener. I can't remember. But the idea that like HRTF, as much as HRTFs vary, they don't vary that much. It's not like any. Somebody even mentioned this on Twitter. I was sort of joking. I said it's all transfer functions all the way down. And then the response I got from someone was like, so in theory, even those like airline earbuds would be acceptable to somebody. It's like, well, no, because that does not resemble any human HRTF.
Well, all right, it would, in a very specific scenario where you had punctured their eardrum and also done severe damage to their masculine process.
Yeah.
That was me who brought that up.
Yes.
Just that,
Yeah.
yes, HRTFs vary, and they vary considerably, and are likely a huge contributing factor in why some people can like one headphone and other people just hate it. Like, I do not enjoy the HD 650. Like, I just don't think it sounds good.
Not based. Although after
HD
seeing how it responds on your head, I understand why.
I have evidence to suggest that what I am getting on my head is not what most people are getting when they listen to an HD 650. But yeah, understanding that it's like, well, the problem isn't in the mid range, the problem is in the treble, and so
Hard agree.
So we can know with a reasonable degree of certainty that if there's a hole in the mid range, like 1K 800 hertz, most people are probably going to experience that hole in the same way, and it's wise for people to EQ that. But in the treble, it's all kind of the Wild West.
Treble is fucky wucky.
Yeah. So here's a question for you then, Joel. Does your recognition of the HC650 having different behavior on your head, being different at your eardrum, let's say, does that change your sense of whether or not that's a good product?
That's a good question. I think that it does, but I don't think that I have enough information to sort of confidently say that my opinion of the HD650 is going to be representative of a lot of people. Like, I think that I just have a reasonable expectation that I'm an outlier there. But I think that this is where we need to go further in headphone measurements, and we need to start measuring variation on individual people, so that we can have some actual information to back that up. Like, we can say headphone X has remarkably low variation, or on the flip side, has the right kind of variation in that it adapts naturally, it interacts with people's ears in a favorable way. And so we can say, yeah, that we have good reason to believe that a wide swath of people are going to experience this headphone subjectively in a way that they can describe as spacious or detailed, or all of these sort of like mystical attributes that we've been chasing after for so long. And so we just don't have the information right now. We have a bunch of individual subjective opinions, and for the most part, people seem to have high praise for the HD600 series. And so I would say that just because I didn't like it doesn't mean that I wouldn't say that you should go try it. You should go listen to it, see if you like it, because I think I'm just an outlier there.
It's difficult because I think it's super unintuitive to do what you just said, though. You know, for a lot of people, the experiential reaction, the experiential knowledge that they get from listening to a pair of headphones is the compelling thing to determine goodness or badness. Yeah. And so to make that next sort of step in terms of the judgment of its goodness, I think is a very difficult thing for people to do, because it requires sort of counteracting that initial, like, well, not for me, right? There are examples of that. I mean, I've made this mistake all the time in the past as well, right? But there are also examples, like I'm thinking of the DCA Expanse and the Stealth, where I don't actually know if this is going to be well received for, you know, a wide swath of people, as you said, but it certainly isn't well received, you know, for my HRTF. And I think it's a difficult line to walk when you can't know, for example, the HPTF effects, or
it's something where it'd be very interesting to have, and something we really want to do, to have more ears with more known transfer functions to get more of an idea of how consistent things are.
Because then you can take the reviewer out of it and you can say, well, for this, you know, we could expect, you know, for a given population that this would behave this way or perform this way, and then judge its goodness based on that, rather than just, you know, what I'm only ever listening out my own two ears, to quote Forrest Gump, right? Rather than basing it on that. So that's the dream, I think.
Yeah, and I think that the ability to try stuff is a huge part of this. Like, I think that a lot of people are just looking on, like, I know that for me, this is almost certainly what I'm doing in all cases, but they're looking online, they're looking at reviews, they're looking at measurements, and then the next decision is a purchase, and they find out after they've made their purchase whether they like it or not. And so, like, I don't happen to have any great local shops near me that I could go to try stuff, but that would be awesome if I could. And actually, like, I could have tried on the HD650, HD600 and been like, oh yeah, this doesn't sound great for me. I guess this is not for me.
So I don't think that this is necessarily the sort of initial concept of headphones.com, but in practice you could you could use it for that. I was thinking, though, there is another solution, and it is sound demos.
I was going to bring that up.
Sound demos done right could potentially help with this,
but not with all of this funky treble subjective stuff that we're talking about.
No,
because the sound demos are subject to all of the same problems with individual variation that the headphone itself
times
is.
Two.
What? Sorry, Blaine?
Times two. They're subject to all the individual variation times two, because you have both the
on the rig and on the person.
Yeah, I mean,
that said, I do want to do sound demos because it's a lot more approachable to people.
Yeah, like when I say sound demos, I don't mean in the way that they are currently done. I mean specifically in the way where you would select the headphones that you have. But you do run into many problems with that, specifically to do with, well, the HRTF variation on the individual, but then also the
and unit variation.
Unit variation.
That out in chat.
Pad wear is
Yeah,
going to be pretty significant. HPTF effects.
There's a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like if it were HD 650 we were doing this on, that would be one of the ones where you would run into that problem pretty quickly.
Everybody would need to have an HD 800, and then we'd be, in a better spot for that.
Or look in an ideal situation, maybe the new Grell took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, the new Grell headphone I think is going to be very interesting as that kind of
It's
device.
an extremely low Z headphone, so it should have less variation. Now
I'm a little bit worried about how pad condition affects that, because they are quite thick. But otherwise it's a much more affordable, ostensibly more affordable, if they kept the price the same as they said at New York.
Yeah.
The price at New York, the price at SoCal was infinity. I tried to buy the prototype and he wouldn't sell it to me.
I remember.
Was it that he just didn't want to sell it to you, though?
No, that's a good question. So Hugo first asked something which is actually we should include here because it's pertinent and we haven't mentioned it. Should we be accounting for ages in population averages? So because there's variation in hearing loss and accordingly preference with age. Thoughts?
I guess the question is, what was the distribution of the population average in the first place?
Well, for the majority of the Harman stuff, it was people with normal hearing.
Right. I meant Hammershoy and Moeller in 2008. Like what the spread of.
But those aren't sensorial. Those were just acoustic measurements. And
your hearing loss is not going to affect your HRTF, but it will expect.
Ooh, that's complicated.
Okay, that's interesting.
However, damage to the cochlea should not affect your HRTF, particularly with a block canal measurement.
Yeah.
Right.
But conductive hearing loss does change the HRTF measured at the drum.
Interesting. So what actually changes physically?
What am I, a medic? I don't know.
I mean,
I'm not an ear surgeon.
The stuff that happens in the middle ear that we don't care about.
Yeah, all I know is that it changes the Z somehow.
Interesting.
That's very interesting.
Now how much, again, that's something where someone who's either A, an ENT/audiologist might know more, or B, someone who's more focused on the ear than the headphones probably knows more.
Ears do change as people age, though, too.
Yeah, people's ears get larger as they age.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a good question.
They become more audiophile.
That's
why audiophiles are old.
So okay, to get back to, though, listener's question about the spread in Hammershoy and Moeller.
Oh yeah.
What?
I don't know.
What was it?
Well, it comes from a whole bunch of different papers. We'd have to actually sort through Hammershoy and Muller, Shaw, Killian et al., a whole bunch of different ones to figure that out. I would guess, memory serving, they did have some tabulation of it, and it was basically like a 30 to 60 age range, but I don't remember super well.
Right.
So but if the question is how much is that going to impact the results, I mean, it's sort of like, is there an ethnic difference? I know some Chinese researchers have demonstrated that hats that were designed based on European ears don't perfectly predict Chinese ears. So there's going to be these small differences. And in general, these are reasons to look less at the minutia if you can, and to look more at the broad strokes and to try to demo things when you can.
So when you say look less at the minutia, I mean, I'm sort of anticipating what your answer is here, but it's worth mentioning, I think. You're saying in the graphs to care less about the minutia.
Yeah.
But individual people are still going to care about the minutia, especially if they're going to be, EQing stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, you can only let yourself be led by a graph so much there. Like, if you actually are trying to EQ for the best sound quality, you'll realize pretty fast that a 3 dB bump here, a 4 dB notch there, particularly thin ones, doesn't necessarily log to your experience.
And this is why I'm not a fan of auto EQ.
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
that's one of the reasons. The other one would be, padware HPTF.
Are you against auto EQ in principle, or are you against the current implementations of auto EQ that exist?
More so, okay. I think it's challenging, right? Because on the one hand, something like that, the idea is a cool one, right? Even if you had a situation though where you said, well, auto EQ up to 5K and then everything else is, listener preference, there are still so many headphones out there that are extremely weird above 5K. So you don't want to discount positive adjustments to those headphones in that region. But I think that it should at the very least come with the caveat that this needs to be done subjectively as well above a certain region. Because it's going to lead to problems otherwise.
I think that's a very reasonable take. And I think that is most of what the sort of existing solutions try to do.
Yeah.
I know that the Squiglink graph tool can be a little bit more aggressive than I'd like it to be, but Yakko's solution there's a transition above 5 or 6 kilohertz where it becomes just aggressively smoothed.
I think that Yakko has as is usual for him, he has a very sensible solution there of not trying to be too aggressive.
Yeah. I think still though it requires some what I've seen. I don't know how ubiquitous this is, but what I've seen is people will say, "Oh, I don't like, X and Y sound." Say they use auto EQ. It's terrible. I don't like, whether it's to Harman or anything else, right? Usually it's Harman. People say, "I don't like Harman. I've used auto EQ, and Harman is terrible. Harman is therefore terrible." And the reality is, you don't even know that they're even hearing it. Yeah. Like they don't, right? So there's maybe like the idea of like how people should use it and then how people end up using it in practice, and that doesn't always match.
The safety rails could be better.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's only so much that the people like Yakko, like Constantine, who are putting these EQs out there can do to stop people from misusing them. Like, you can tell people, this isn't going to be perfect for you. You need to adjust it to yourself, listen to things and play with it. And there's going to be a large percentage of people who are still going to be like...
I have a mildly cursed take on that. I don't know how cursed it is, but I actually think that the exercise of inputting the values manually is a safety rail against misuse. Because as soon as you start doing it manually, then it's much easier you already have it available to start doing it by ear. Does that make sense? Rather than
I think that the word you're looking for is not safety rail. It's an educational tool.
Yes.
People might accidentally
or barrier
to
entry.
That's exactly the point I was going to bring up. It's also like just a massive opportunity for people to make mistakes in how they do this. And like Oratory's subreddit is just filled with people asking for help in how they actually implement the preset in the PDF. And so, I think that it's hard. Like, it's hard to EQ something by ear if you don't have a lot of experience doing that. And people very quickly feel lost and they just want somebody to tell them what to do. Just please give me the preset that is going to make it sound the best. And so finding a solution that works for people who don't feel super comfortable with these things and is still sensible, is still not just trying to make the entire graph look perfectly smooth, but then also gives people sort of like guide rails and how do I adjust this subjectively? What are some areas that I should consider where my preference might vary from just the average?
Something I really want to see actually is like an EQ that's designed from a standpoint of trying to address common problems that people have rather than just...
Oh yeah, I agree completely.
So this is related, but this is the Accentum from Sennheiser, and I'm not going to say that I really recommend this headphone. It's okay, but they have an EQ in there which is also fairly primitive. It's graphic EQ with like, I don't know, 6 bands or something. But one of the cool things that they do have in there is a guide where you play music and then it takes you through, kind of like how if you go and get glasses, they do the like different, is this better, is this better? And you get 3 different options. You can select which one sounds better with your music. And then afterwards you can look at the EQ and it'll show you what the result is that you ended up with. And it's super primitive in this, but I think something like that would be kind of cool. There is obviously a worry about like, as you get used to something, it could make the results kind of weird. But I do like the idea of like giving someone an experiential guide through EQ so that they can at the very least hear what the effect of an adjustment is. I think it's
right.
cool.
Yeah,
So
like I think
go
ahead, listener.
So that's part of why I was, methodological or psychoacoustic benefits aside, that's why I was so interested and excited about the prospect of just a flat tilt as a target to a HRTF baseline, because one of the things I intended to do was actually commission a VST plugin that would allow a very simple graphical user interface where it's just a tilt knob, additional bass boost, ear gain adjustment, and then you could give people that and just tell them to EQ to DF before that, and then give them that, and then they could adjust their preferences. Now, the person I was going to commission said that the tilt was not within their skill set, and then the idea died. But past that, if you were to look at my Squig link, there is the option to upload your own music, and the EQ changes you make in the Squig link window will apply to the music on output playing out of Squig link.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think
that's very cool.
Yeah, there's also pink noise and a tone generator and Scarlet Fire, which is like a Otis McDonald song. It's royalty free. Been a fan of him for a long time, but that's on there too. I think the barrier to a lot of this is visual feedback. Needs to be good, and Squiglink is already really good at that. So having it in Squiglink helps a lot. But yeah, hearing the changes you're making as you're making them is huge. I will also say that the thing that Sennheiser I think is using is actually made, I think, by another company.
I believe so.
It starts with an M. I forgot what it's called. And it's present in a few products. I actually think Focal might even use it too.
No, that's the Mimi sound hearing test. That is based on your inputs for. Yeah, that's not a. The Mimi thing is basically an upshelf with a comb filter.
Okay, I think I'm thinking of the thing that SonarWorks uses then, which is different.
Right.
Which sounds more like what you described with the Accentum, where you're given a bunch of sound samples and you choose which one you prefer.
No, so the sound sample is the same. It's your music, but you're given a bunch of different EQ options, and you just select which one sounds better, and they go through the range.
So it's your music, and they just apply filters. Yeah. Got it. Okay, then never mind. That sounds like something novel, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it may be in other things as well, but I think it's kind of cool that they're doing that. It's still it's way too basic. That's the problem. It's the problem with any of these like app-based EQs is that they never let you adjust or input, specific values to make an adjustment in the place where the headphone needs adjustment. It's so frustrating.
Oh, yeah, we could go on about that for a while, because that's just a problem with EQ in general when it comes to most software implementations.
No way to affect Q value, like nothing. It's like, and I get it. They're saying, well, it's too complicated for people, and I think in some cases it's like, well, however they design the headphone, there's even a limitation to being able to do that.
Sure.
But still, I wish. And it's like, AKG does it. Why can't everybody else do it? So, I don't know.
I think the problem with so many of these tools is that you get a result at the end, and then you're like, okay, but what did that even do? Like, they don't kind of tell you what the results are.
Mm-hmm. That's why I think a visual interface is so important.
Yeah. The visual feedback is super important. And I think that this is just the design goals problem. Like, for most of these apps, they want something that is super simple, impossible to screw up, and their goal is really not to educate the people who are using the tool. But I think that we just care that people understand it and are able to kind of use that to go further in their audio journey. And so we're not selling headphones here.
Yeah. We should dive into the chat because we've mostly ignored
Well,
the chat.
we actually didn't even address the question of whether there should be accounting for age, I actually think it'd be interesting to have some sort of a visualization of the spread of preference that I think it was Miller and the Knowles paper found based on age. But yeah.
So I don't really have too much of an opinion on accounting for age in population average, but I don't see why not.
Well, I think that it's just good to account for it as a display of the variation of preferences that might exist.
Yeah, just to adjust the bounds.
Yeah.
Right. There was another question about. I'm trying to find it. Given how good Harman over ear predicts preference, is the difference in treble that significant? I think this is referring to difference in HRTF. I
think it depends on what you mean by that significant.
Yeah. I mean, objectively, it's not significant enough to change the Harman results because otherwise the Harman results would be different. However, equally, it is objectively as significant as whatever its impact on the Harman results was, and we don't know what that is until we control for it and actually see how that changes the Harman results. So currently, it's like we can say that these things aren't things that will move mountains. Equally, objectively, there's good reason to believe that they would change the degree to which people would prefer certain things.
I kind of think that like the biggest thing is that when people are looking at like something relative to Harman, the point is that it doesn't necessarily need to 100% match. In fact, it probably shouldn't 100% match it in order for it to be even preferable to people. But obviously that doesn't mean that you can do anything, that there are trends.
I think that there's also a potential for a different question that's being asked here. Like if you've got 5 headphones and all of them I've taken Oratory's preset and I've applied all of them, I EQ them to Harman and I listen to them, they're not going to sound the same. And so in that context, does the treble stuff matter? It's like, well, yeah, I think it does matter because these headphones do sound different to one another, but that's sort of a circumstance which is the opposite of what they were doing in the Harman research, where they're trying to eliminate all of those effects and just the way the methodology worked out in the Harman research essentially means that you can't test for those things, where it's subtle variations in the treble response between different headphones, because they're only EQing with kind of broad adjustments based on the Hertz measurement.
Well, and also it's wiped out above 10K anyways.
So if I can bring this back to the speaker world for a second, we're all, I think, aware that in-room frequency response for speakers isn't the only thing, and I'd imagine that a lot of our viewers are as well, but that's a very old result now, decades and decades old. It was one of the things that Sean and Floyd Toole sort of cut their teeth on. However, a speaker that has a bad frequency response, in this case bad is a complete lack of bass, massive spikes, massive dips in rooms, will be perceived badly, right? So it's sort of a necessary but not sufficient criteria. Harman has given us sort of a necessary condition for a general shape of a response that will be preferred, but that doesn't mean that it's given us the totality of the factors that will influence preference, right?
Yeah. Well, and you can see that in the research itself. Like the correlation with the preference model is not a perfect correlation. There are some factors that exist that aren't accounted for by FR there.
Yep. Or at least by the analysis. Yeah.
So I wanted to. Anytime we're talking about Harman, the Dr.
Just
Olive,
pull up the Dr. Olive.
Yeah, thing has to be on display. I've decided that's its function now. So I wanted.
We should really get all of them so that when we talk about the 5128, we have the Brüel and Kjaer Burger King one.
Oh yes, yes, please send me all of those, and I will do it. I wanted to get the into the spicy takes and the spicy questions, but I was wondering if maybe if you guys have some, we could start off with that.
Blaine?
Well, I was actually going to ask Joel if there's one that he
true.
Hasn't had the opportunity to ask, or maybe we missed.
Like a spicy take?
Something that you think might be either underappreciated, not known about, or controversial.
I think that, well, and you guys all know this about me, but I think that DSP based like surround simulation is unquestionably the future of headphones.
DSP based.
Yeah, not the natural soundstage of the headphone, but what audiophiles typically think of as artificial soundstage. I think
Is
basically
actual soundstage.
the first company that can figure out a way to make that sound natural to a wide group of people and give it to them in a way that is user friendly enough that they actually enjoy setting it up is going to be the company that just starts crushing everybody in terms of the subjective sound quality. Because
So you're a
headphones
big
are just-
investor in Dolby.
maybe. I don't know if Dolby's going to be the one
Or
to pull it
Apple.
off, but Apple. My money would be on Apple.
Yeah, probably.
It's almost certainly going to be them.
Yeah.
You could imagine it.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of the only brands that are actually doing that in their portable consumer products.
I mean, it's all integrated into like everything now, right? Like they're
The
trying to
as
3D
far as I'm aware,
scanning
it's
thing with the
AirPods
iPhone is
line.
going to give them some scary capabilities.
Yeah. I was gonna say my spicy take that maybe some haven't heard yet is that I don't think soundstage in headphones is something that anybody should care about. So first, it's that I don't.
Stereo music.
What's that?
That's not spicy.
With stereo music, yeah, with stereo music. Well, first, this is not controversial that people way over focus on soundstage in headphones in regular stereo headphones. Like HT800S is a very spacious sounding headphone, and then it's like a soundstage to the max. Yes, important.
But how will I be a competitive gamer?
So
if
that's
I don't
so
have
my
an HT800.
so
I
right.
think
So
I
my point
disagree
is
with you.
well,
I might
hold on,
disagree
hold on.
too a little bit,
Hold
though
on. I'm not even talking about the about that side of things because I think that is part of it. I'm talking about specifically the spaciousness effect is not particularly interesting in my mind. Like I don't find it to be a compelling part of the experience, at least not nearly as compelling as some other like an even tonal balance or like other parts of the experience.
I would say it's low on my list.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if, as at least one study has shown, that it's one of the things people index for most.
Hold on though, because what Joel's talking about, I think, is the far more compelling thing. If we're talking about like actual localization in headphones somehow, then that would be real soundstage. That would be compelling.
Yeah. I would agree, but I think the what Kryn has called immersiveness, or what that study calls, what do they call it? Externalization.
Yeah.
I think either of those things could be a more or a higher indexed factor than tonality.
Right. I suppose where the spice in my take here is that I think these are things that are of a difference in kind, not degree. So, the HT800S and HT800, right, are widely known as having the most spacious sound in headphones. I don't think that holds a candle to actual localization, not in terms of like how far away something is, but in terms of actually not having any localization because it's still in headphones on your head with stereo recordings.
Yeah, I think we're all agreed there.
Yeah.
And I think my main contention with soundstage as a thing to talk about with other people is that very few people, in my experience, have experienced it the same.
Yeah.
Like exactly the same. So it's really hard to make a recommendation based on that.
Yeah.
It's difficult to know that people are even talking about the same thing when they say soundstage. Because I think that for me, if I try to sort through what people are talking about when they use terms like soundstage and imaging, what I care about more is imaging than soundstage. Like I hate it when a headphone has like a really strong like left, right, maybe center. I guess people call that the 3 blob effect.
Yeah.
Yes, I get that effect with the K701. I don't know if everyone does, but I have that effect very strongly for whatever reason, and it's actually quite intrusive.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why I don't like
stereo panning is exaggerated.
Now, the question that I would have for you guys on that is, do you think that the opposite of that, so like what people have maybe traditionally called soundstage, and what I'm calling here a spaciousness effect, I've switched the language because I don't like using that term anymore.
Yeah.
Do you think that is like basically you can have a continuum from 3 blob to spaciousness effect, such that even if you were to look at the frequency response and maybe even like, you know, whatever the psychoacoustics that are involved, you know, if you went the other way on the continuum, you would end up with the other result.
I'm not sure I understand.
So like, for example, people often use the HD 600 as an example, and the contrast to that would be the HD 800S.
Mm-hmm.
So I can frame it in terms of the description of the experience. We might say that spaciousness is the opposite of 3 blob. But do we think that what's going on acoustically is also identifiable as the opposite, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, I have no idea.
It's interesting to think about, like, what acoustic property really leads to,
that
for example, the 3 blob thing.
Yeah,
I think Blaine has a theory.
Blaine, what's your theory?
What?
No, wasn't your theory?
Well, wait, what are you talking about?
The 3 blob effect.
I mean, for head stage, there are some things that we use to cue proximity in frequency response. Like, that's sort of why arguably the HD800 sounds more diffuse.
Mm-hmm.
Headphones.
Are you talking about the balance between like canal resonance versus like?
So it's like the exact
stuff?
shape of the area between like 500 and 4,000 hertz.
Okay.
And there's somewhere in Zwicker's psychoacoustics, there's a table for this. I should get it. But there are certain FR changes that people associate with differences in distance. And I do think that some combination of that may give us sort of an over-priming for this is right in front of me, this is hard to the left, this is hard to the right. Because if it feels very close in the illusory head stage, then perhaps that also is why it feels pan. However,
Yeah.
I don't know that that's purely conjectural, and I will say, for me, soundstage head stage is so variable that it depends a lot on what you're listening to, right? Like, if you're listening to different music, if you're playing a different video game, it will have a meaningful impact.
Yeah, for sure. I think that definitely fits with how people describe soundstage, but I think that when people talk about imaging, which is really what I care about more, I think that that's the more interesting question, because for me, that's not so much related to my perception of distance, but is more related to, is this sound coming from more in front of me? Is it coming from the sides? What's the balance from the forward direction to the side direction?
Like an even distribution of sound, basically, in your head.
And I think that there's a very real possibility that that's related to fake directional cues that are being created by the interaction between the headphone and the ear.
So for you, would you say the HD 600 gives you that effect?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I get the 3 blob effect with the HD 650, and I find it awful.
Yeah. See, it's interesting. I definitely notice it with the HD6 series. I don't know that I care that much about it. The other thing that I was wondering on this specific topic was the difference between proximity of the driver. Well, not just proximity, but position of the driver relative to the ear canal entrance, and between, say, for example, HD 600 and HD 800. And if this is some additional sort of psychoacoustic element that's sort of at work here.
So that's something I've wondered about a lot. And I was going to conduct my own very shambolic tests on that this weekend.
I mean, like, we could talk about, like, there's all kinds of various different things that are priming us in that scenario too, right? Including the frequency response. But I'm wondering if you basically, you know, if all else is the same, does this have an effect? You know,
it's a theory I had asked Blaine about, because my theory would be, as you move closer to the canal entrance, you get more of canal effects, less of the pinna and head and all that, which I would assume would lead to a psychoacoustic impression of the sound being more in your head or in your canal versus external to the head.
I have no idea.
But I have no idea.
Things unfortunately are rarely so. I mean, obviously, we get back to the fucking people preferred the KU 100 result to their own goddamn heads thing, right?
Oh yeah,
like,
and that basically has like no canal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, canals will never matter for directionality. It's important to note. Canals matter, and there's someone on the internet who will be very mad at me saying that, but I can prove that. God, sorry. I can prove that there is not a directional component to the canal's pickup, right? That it is basically just a straight tube that is just applying a static function regardless of incidence.
Right.
I think that where the driver angle is going to matter is that it's going to affect the kind of interaction that is going on between your ear and the headphone, which contributes to the final FR that you get. And so there's definitely, I think, potential that if the driver is oriented relative to the ear in a certain way, you might get a more desirable FR in situ for that person. But I don't think that it's an effect that's not going to show up in measurements, or at least in like blocked canal measurements.
Right. Sorry, somebody says, Capra says, would 3-blob haters also be center channel haters? But this is sort of the point that I'm suggesting, that like this is different in kind from speakers.
Yeah.
So I don't know that would really translate.
I think that as a 3-blob hater, it's not so much the 3-blob effect, but really the 2-blob, the left blob and the right blob. Like center channel is what I want. I want that center channel so that it feels like sound is coming from in front of me and not to my left and to my right.
So would you prefer a DT 1990 over an HD 600?
I've actually never listened to a DT 1990.
Or sorry, any of the, like a 990 or an 880 or something, one of the Bayers.
That doesn't help. I've never listened to a Bayer.
Okay. Well, it's interesting.
You never listened to a Bayer? Or Bayer?
I have a relatively small collection of headphones, and that's really what I listen to.
What is your collection of headphones?
Well, I'm listening right now on the Edition XS. I also have the HEX4, which is basically just Drop's version of the 400 SE. I have a 560S, a 650. I've got the KSC 75s, which my wife mostly uses. I feel like I'm forgetting. I have a few random IEMs.
Hey, mid-fi hell is the best place to be.
Well, see, I've escaped the mid-fi hell by just building my own blocked canal mics and EQing everything to my own HRTF.
Yeah. This is the way. That's what I was saying. Like you can get some really good performing headphones. Actually, so I don't know. Part of me would almost think like, hey, like there's bound to be some benefits to like the ultra low distortion odysseys, like LCD2s and stuff like that, for that kind of experiment, right? Where you can go crazy with EQ. But I don't know how granular you want to get.
Arguably. If you needed to EQ out some like very deep null that is present on your head, and you just need to apply like a ridiculous amount of gain, then maybe low distortion but would benefit if you can't push that driver far enough.
But I was gonna say, at a certain point, like a lot of those mid-fi options are so much better that you don't need to do much.
Yeah.
So I actually don't know, listener, what your current collection is. As I'm sure you have other people talking to you, so
no, my partner's just running some dishes. My current collection is the 560S I'm wearing on my head, which I've been using more and more lately. I just find it becomes very good with EQ. It's light. It's easy to just throw on and turn on the EQ profile. Past that, I still have an MM500 that I wore on the last stream. I have my 800s. And then I have a bunch of odds and ends that have been sent from either headphones.com or Kyle or some other friends. Yeah, I've been using the U6T quite a lot.
Oh, yeah.
because
I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that fits our paradigm.
It does. And we liked it before we knew that it fit the paradigm.
Yeah.
So, you says, please yell at listener for his DT200 propaganda. Yeah, I've already done that. No.
Oh, that's that's you from HPHQ, who I'm pretty sure he says that the Universal Ears reference monitor is the correct PINA gain.
I don't know if
we can continue that fight elsewhere.
Okay.
No, it's kind of personal, isn't it?
DT200 is interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah, because you hate it.
Yeah.
So okay, this is
I
one...
never would have predicted that, but it's so cool that happened. Genuinely.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. So it's not just... This is one where for me it's like, how like you go like, oh, I can see how someone would like this, but it's not my jam. It's not my preference. Yeah. The DT200 is one where I'm more like, you can tolerate this. That's the level of difference that it is for me. Mm-hmm. So I would expect that it's probably like a mid-band delta of around at least 3 dB, and then also the resonance shift being fairly significant.
Oh, you hear differences in the mid too?
Sorry, no. A mid-band, I mean specifically around 5-6K, but a mid Q.
Yeah. Right. Got it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Jeez.
And you guys think that that's fit related? Isn't that your?
I think it's front volume length related.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, and do you have a pretty shallow fit with the DT200, Andrew?
I tried lots. I specifically upon listeners' requests, and it didn't really make that much of a difference for me. But when I'm doing the manual sweep, I right at around 6.1K, it just goes up like crazy for me.
Which is ostensibly the length mode resonance, which to me, with DT200, which is like for me a very ergonomic small IEM that I can get reasonably deep fit with. To me, it just serves as an indication that Andrew likely has a pretty long canal.
Yeah.
And you know what they say about guys with long canals? Low frequency length.
Yeah.
Low tolerance for the presence region.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Now there's a pickup line if I've ever heard one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also explains why you like the Hexa so much.
Yeah. It's crazy. Even the Hexa is a little shrill there for me. Just a little.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because like DT200 is like, at least to the 5128 DF, kind of like once it hits 3K, it does roll off.
Yeah.
On like that canal.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, you really, I guess you need something like the Meteor where like at 5K, it just like.
That's why the Meteor is, well, I wouldn't say it's the best for me, but it's very good. I also really like the Cuba Ears, not the
Orchestra Light.
The Theaudio Oracle Mark 1.
Oh,
yeah.
Did that have a recession in that area?
I don't recall specifically, but for whatever reason, it really works for me. The other interesting thing about the DT200 is how different it was depending on the tips. We used the stock tips. It was way more normal, but then when I used like any of the other tips that were just tips that come with whatever, like generic tips, it was very shrill in the lower treble.
Yeah, this actually brings up two things that I want to talk about. The first is that this variation in like ostensibly canal length between you and the 5128 really served as an example of why the 5128 is so important. Because if we were still using 711, you would have been, you're 2 whole kilohertz away from like our standardized insert depth of like 8K.
Yeah.
Which is, even though it's not a perfect sim for you, like it's closer, meaningfully closer. Well,
technically that was already something I discovered when I was like doing the experiments with Olive's Gadgets. What was his thing called? The Earphone. I went through this with him and discovered that as well. I went, oh, huh. because he was building EQ profiles based on where that was for people, and we found that for me it was lower down as well. But yeah, I think that the key here though is that we're using the DF-HRTF, and so this is an indication of that difference.
Right. Well, the second thing is that, like, you had said this. I mean, probably a fair time ago, so not recently, definitely not since you've had the 5128. But I remember just from being a fan of the streams for a while that you did at one point say that tips don't make much of a difference.
Yeah.
As far as a measured result. But part of why I'm so interested in 5128 as a system for IEM measurements is because tips are an ergonomic thing that interacts and determines distance. Like if you're using different tips, but you're normalizing the length mode to 8K, you're going to see less differences than you would see if you put it in a pinna and the tip affected where it sat in a pinna.
So the tip's not making a difference thing, I actually think that's Crin's point. And that's specifically because he was using the canal entrance, sort of the canal extension tube, right? Which makes sense if you're normalizing at 8K. But as you say, as soon as you're using an actual canal, then you're going to find those effects. I also found that this was also years ago. There were IEMs where their tolerability would significantly change when going from silicon tips to foam tips, even though the measured result didn't really show anything meaningfully different. So that also is a difference of insertion depth potentially, right? Yeah. I would expect.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there were other factors in play too, but as far as I'm aware, it's mostly depth and length.
Yeah.
I was just going to say something too. Oh, this is the part where Blaine and I bully you to only use a pinna for measuring IEMs, even on 711. Right, Blaine?
I mean, I think it's interesting to look at the impact of it. Like, I'd actually like to add, I mean, people who are watching this may be aware that we're looking to add positional variation plots. I'd really like to have a visualization that shows the impact of insertion depth, because that will show in part the damping of the IEM. So more damp front tube resonance will mean that you will have a lower Q peak, and so it should shift less.
Yep.
I think that even if you could get plots of like, okay, this is with the insertion depth at 5K, this is with it at 6K, this is and you could try EQing based on a variety of measurements to see which one matches and to see if one of those sounds better to you. Because I've had trouble particularly with shallow insertion depth IEMs where I just have not been able to get the treble to sound right no matter how hard I try with EQ. It might just be because I'm bad at EQ, but
I doubt that.
No, I know what you mean. I've run into the same issue. And
so yeah, the Pixel Buds Pro are a perfect example of this. Like, got them for free, was trying to make them sound somewhat okay, have not been able to get the treble to sound okay.
People hate me for saying that they don't sound good.
They don't. They sound just bad.
Yeah. Hey, that must mean that we're Apple fanboys. That's just how that works.
But the tech tubers like them, and so who are we to disagree with the tech tubers?
Exactly. I mean, measuring with a pinna is with IEMs is definitely more challenging than using a canal extension tube. Especially if one of the things that you're trying to assess when measuring with a canal extension tube is channel matching. As soon as and this was sort of one of my worries before about showing channel matching on a 5128 for people who don't realize, even for example, the non-Funtact results, the bump shows up in different spots for each channel. And I've even had people say like, well, okay, the channel matching on that's terrible. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's perfect. It's within whatever, right? But because of that bump showing up in different spots and people not being able to ignore it when they're reading it, it's caused issues. Now, obviously, that wouldn't be the case with the pinna for 711 for Gross if we use the pinna for IEMs, because it doesn't have the rocking
feature.
It does.
Or it can.
In 711?
Yeah.
With the pinna?
Definitely can.
Okay, then that's another reason not to
even
do
with
it.
the canal extension, you could still get it.
Yeah.
Even though it's less common.
It's all about how stiffly the IEM is held.
Yeah.
It'll depend in part on the ear tips, the annoying thing, and it's about how much contact there is and how much literal wiggle room there is. Because you're literally seeing the mechanical rocking of the body of the IEM.
Right. I have not seen it anywhere near as significant on 711, regardless of how I use it, compared to the 5128 and the 4620.
Well, now it's a bit different on the 5128 versus the KB 5001/0.
But I mean, in practice, it still matters that it's quite significant on the 5128.
I mean, yeah, because
as far as how people read that stuff, I worry about this kind of,
like people shouldn't look at small wiggles.
I mean, yeah, for sure. It's the same thing though with the frickin' canal entrance constructive interference.
Okay, but yeah, so the overall theme here should be people should not look at small wiggles. Maybe we should just move to 1/3 octave smoothing again.
Ooh, no.
Hold on.
If you kids can't behave,
we're gonna move
to 3 points per octave.
check the stream.
Everyone disliked that.
Oh, yes, Olive particularly, if it is.
Well,
actually,
I kind of see the argument for it. I'm not saying that I want 1/3 octave smoothing, but
if you kids can't behave, I will take away all those data points.
I think that maybe a manually cleaned graph that is kind of presented to people. Like, so if for example, you showed the raw graph and the raw graph is unprocessed, but the compensated graph has all of those little features kind of polished out. So like, say if you do get a rocking little wiggle in the bass, just some extra smoothing applied to just that feature to make it go away might be really helpful to people in understanding, because the things that we know are not real issues have just been taken out of the graph.
It's difficult to implement that in a programmatic way, though.
I mean, to be fair, we are curators. Like, we can curate.
Sure, but in for example, a database.
I know.
There's an extent to which I'm hesitant to manipulate data like that, though.
Yeah, so like when we're delivering reviews of products, we can obviously do this.
Are we actually hesitant to manipulate that data though? Because
just in the example of the rocking mode,
people are talking about putting blue tack in there. That's also manipulating the data. It's just you're not changing it post processing,
right, at the input, not the output.
Data acquisition to avoid that. So it's still the same results.
Okay, but what do you think about the constructive interference feature at 8K? Constantine seems to think that the targets should factor that in. Yeah, and I imagine Dr. Olive does too.
Wait, what did you say? The problem is it's not going to be a consistent thing.
Sure. But
it's the same thing though as this static compensation between the 5128 and the 711. It's not going to be consistent. Yes, we know it's not perfect, but on average, it will reduce the error of what people are seeing.
Yes, that's my position as well.
Yeah, I mean it's a hard question to chew on. I think that if I was going to give people something to EQ off of, I definitely would want to reduce or omit that, or possibly just like plank out that area. But if I was giving someone an EQ guide, I wouldn't even give them data above 8K. Like, it would be like a single point. You know?
Yeah. I don't know, man. I think that there is significant error in the way that people read graphs. We know this to be true. And that error is exacerbated by features like specifically constructive interference, less so the dip on the on Gross. All right. But the fact that
I think the issue with Gross is that people are already familiar with it.
Well, they're familiar with it, but at the same time, a peak is worse than a dip.
Yeah.
Especially to that magnitude.
If you're smoothing, say you're smoothing something in an automated way to try to figure out what you should do with the treble, a peak will have a much larger impact on the smoothed region than a dip. Like a dip will just get smoothed right over. But if you're doing the math right, a peak will actually come to dominate the smoothed result. And so the peak does make things much more difficult if you're trying to do EQ in an automated way in that region.
And also the other side of it too is that
technically we could build an algorithm that it
Yeah.
perceptually weights.
So I have another solution. That is to basically, in our new way of representing it, which will be revealed soon. Which technically it's already been.
I mean,
revealed.
why aren't we just? We should just show it to them. Like they're here, we're here, we're in the overtime. Nobody's probably still watching.
Yeah. Mainly because I don't
69 people still watching.
Yeah, I
Nice.
don't want to. There's some text that I don't want people to.
There's text you don't want people to see?
The name of the project is one that I'm told to not reveal yet.
Oh.
And it's in the visualization of it.
Fair enough.
Is it?
Yeah. So, but anyways, there's a video that I'm working on that will be out soon on this. But basically, there is a new method of visualizing the data for folks who aren't aware. And one of the things that we're doing in it is we are showing preference boundaries. And what we could theoretically do, is create some sort of relevance shading to different regions, in theory. So that's an area where we could say, well, the relevance for this is of this peak is insignificant, but the rest of the stuff is much more significant.
I mean, it gets complicated because now you're just adding more and more pieces of information, and the whole point of the software is to make it easier, not harder.
Yeah, like visual clutter is something that we are sort of struggling to balance as well.
It's very hard to have something that's as multivariate as audio measurements and then represent it in like a single user-friendly plot.
Trying to make it accessible,
yeah, it's like...
In fairness to the effort so far, it looks rather good.
Time will tell.
I'm a fan so far.
Yeah. There we have some internal debates. You guys have obviously seen it, but like we have some additional internal debates about how the public is going to receive it. But there's a sense in which we don't know until it is unleashed. So that'll happen soon.
And there's an extent to which no matter what path you chose anyway, once you do unleash it, you'll get pushback. So
yes, I think that there's, as long as there is raw measurements sort of as a fallback to the super nerds who care about, okay, what did you actually do to process this data? I think that actually eliminating information that is going to mislead people is going to be valuable to the average person. Like any solution which basically just gets rid of the 8K resonance in the view that people are seeing by default, I think is a good solution.
Including smoothing to 1/3?
Maybe not for the whole graph.
No, I don't know. I think that there are multiple reasons to include the feature in the compensation even.
Yeah, and that's what I would advocate for.
Yeah.
I've had conversations with Blaine about this, but my proposed method of how we should come to our baseline diffuse field is quite different from what most people think it should be.
And what's that?
I think that, and of course the problem with this approach is money, because it would be a very expensive.
Oh, you mean to not calculate?
I think that we should get a whole bunch of people. We should measure all of their HRTFs. We should look at how a set of headphones measures on those people, and then look at how those headphones measure on the 5128. And we are creating a prediction of, if a headphone measures this way on the 5128, it is most likely to produce the diffuse field on a large collection of people.
So
and that would capture something like the 8K resonance that you get on the 5128, but not on most people.
And what we're doing is effectively calculated from free field on.
What he wants to loop into the feedback loop is a bunch of headphone responses on both real human heads with known HRTFs and on the 5128. So he wants to figure out
full population average.
It's the delta. He wants to take the delta of the delta, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a good approach.
You'd still calculate it based on the free field responses likely to, but I'm adding extra steps.
Yes,
very
extra
expensive,
costly steps. I actually, it's funny because Sean actually has some of the data that could enable this, and I asked him during his presentation at CanJam, about that specifically. So hopefully we might be able to get him to resample some of the data from his headphone test to do this the Merrifield approach.
Historically, that is contingent just on how much wine you supply him with.
Yeah, I'm thinking we should all maybe we should
good
fund it.
It has to be good.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I should actually send him
I
like the only good
some
wine that I know.
Snobs who can recommend wines to me.
We'll get him some good
out,
natural wine.
We can figure out what he likes. We'll send him a lot of wine, and if all else fails, we'll just do a heist and steal some data from Hartman.
Okay. Well, you've now
one
just
data
given it
heist
away.
at a time.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Any other topics, guys? Anything?
So you in chat had another hot take, saying that Helmholtz resonators were the best way to address treble issues in IEMs. And there's actually a specific example I could think of for why this isn't a good idea. Are you guys familiar with the Seventh Acoustic Supernova?
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
It's an IEM.
You cannot buy.
Yeah, it's just from their one direct-to-consumer storefront. And by all accounts, it's a pretty well-regarded IEM. I think Precog reviewed it positively. I know Mark also reviewed it positively, if I remember correctly. But I got a chance to hear it recently, and I didn't like it at all. And I wondered why, and when I looked at the measurement, I saw a very narrow dip at the 8K resonance. And in talking to VB from Prisma Audio, I actually learned that was an idea he gave Steven from 7th Acoustics, which was a Helmholtz resonator specifically tuned to 8 kilohertz to kill that peak. I heard a pretty big 7K peak on that
and
idea.
then a dip.
And then a dip.
This is the same problem that that I faced when I was doing the custom DIY phone with the backpacks, which I guess people don't know about. But the problem that I ran into was I was trying to kill a 6 kilohertz resonance with electrical filters.
Mm-hmm.
And what would end up happening is in some positions it would kill the resonance. In other positions it would kill 5K and that 6K peak would still be there. And in other positions it would kill 7K. And the end result was that I ended up soldering myself to many different capacitors and resistors. Which is just not good. But yeah.
The not good thing is that we don't have video of that. If we had video of that, would be good content.
We do have video of that.
Oh,
yes,
really?
I did record it. So if we ever do, content with that, then
we could just put it to like the Yakety sax and just show the supercut of all the times you burned yourself.
I mean,
that would be good content.
The thing is, there's so much more footage of me not burning myself.
Well, someone would have to watch through and flag all the times that you burned yourself, but I think we could find a volunteer to watch you suffer.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
I volunteer.
Yeah.
But yeah, positioning matters is the reason why.
It's also arguably a case for just having a normal damper, right? Because that just changes the mode regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, that did the same thing. So all of that was for naught.
No, I'm talking about length.
And for IEMs.
Flipped over to the length mode of IEMs. Yes. For a length mode, if you have it. Anyway, yes.
Yeah.
In general, designing to the measurements is inevitably something that's going to happen. I don't generally think it's a good idea. Like, it's Cunningham's law, right?
You say right like I would know what that is.
The one where you say the wrong information and then get corrected?
No, that's not Hanlon's razor, is it? It's
Are you talking about no Cunningham's law?
Oh, that is Cunningham's law.
Yeah.
Shit, whose law is it? It's not Sayre's law.
Is it the left-hand
law? It's Goodhart's law.
Oh yeah,
so when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
So it's not the left-hand law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cunningham's law is that the easiest way to get the answer on the internet is to give the wrong answer.
Okay.
which I guess was actually just demonstrated.
Based.
Yeah, the best way to get something is by posting something very incorrect in chat.
Yep. But no, Goodhart's law is something that really matters. Is that once people start gaming metrics stop predicting the outcomes you actually want.
Right.
And that's always going to be a problem for measurements. I mean, it was already a problem for non-measurements, right? Like we made this IEM with 17 balanced armatures, 3 electrostatic tweeters, a fucking tactile transducer in the bass, and you know what? I'll just claim there's some plasma in it or whatever. That's also Goodhart's law. They're indexing there instead of for a measured result. The metric is we've checked all these boxes of this has this fancy technologies.
Yeah.
Well, that's
doesn't mean it's a good headphone.
More is better.
Sales and marketing list of things, laundry list.
Man, the world would be a much nicer place without them.
Yeah, agreed.
Can't live with them. Can't get away with the charges. So
that is also an inside baseball joke because I work in a marketing department.
Your marketing is good though, from what I've seen.
We'll give you a pass.
Yeah.
You're one of the good ones.
Well, and I think that the funny thing, even from a marketing perspective, is that like the world is learning and people are starting to not care about the things that used to be put on product boxes. And now like lots of IEM manufacturers are putting measurements on the box to show, hey, look, this is a well-measuring IEM.
As they should.
And so in some ways, it's not so much a problem with the marketers who are just going to try to give people the information that they think is going to sell the product, but just on the broad level of awareness among the consumers.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the problem is still audiophiles. The problem will always be
audiophiles.
Mm-hmm.
Very true.
Yep.
And on that bombshell,
back to the tent.
So for the record, Back to the Tent is the Grand Tour.
That's right.
On that bombshell was actually, he explicitly doesn't do that in the Grand Tour because I think it's actually owned by Top Gear. So he said on that massive disappointment.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Eminent One says, what do 8K resonance sound like?
Like
sounds like a peak at 8K.
It sounds like sibilance.
Someone get the tone generator.
Yeah, actually,
oh god, no! Do not do that to them. These poor viewers.
No, I won't. But I actually think it's something useful for people to try and do. I mean,
it's honestly, this is a good case for playing around with EQ APL.
Yeah. I mean, so like tone generator is one thing,
peak.
but listening to music and adjusting with EQ like while you're doing it is a good indication of what how various different frequency ranges affect the sound.
Or you could use listener swig link.
Yeah.
And use pink noise, which is what I usually use as like a.
I just listen to pink noise.
Balance.
It's my favorite track.
Well,
I mean, I listen to metal, which according to my data is quite similar to pink noise. So
what's that?
Oh, one of the slides at my seminar was the histogram of a heavy metal song compared to pink noise, and they're almost identical.
This is why we listen to Feuerschwanz.
It's still gonna look like pink noise. I'll bet you almost anything.
No, I'm saying it's good.
I mean, yes, it is. I mean, I love Feuerschwanz. Moralish is my favorite of theirs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pumpernickel's Law. Blaine's Law. What would Blaine's Law be if you had a law?
I already have a law? I was talking to Cameron about this at one point.
Something about.
I have an answer, but I will withhold it.
My answer is definitely not safe for work.
No, I'm saying that's Blaine's law.
What?
Blaine's law is he has an answer, but will withhold it.
Oh well, yes. That's only when dealing with you.
Mine was going to be about equestrianism.
Okay,
what?
no, do tell. So I may have used an aphorism at one point that apparently made quite an impression on Andrew Park.
Yeah, it was probably one of the best metaphors. Well, especially in that context.
Yeah. So for context, this was at work.
Yeah.
Great.
The metaphor was it's hard to be enthusiastic about equestrianism when you're elbow deep in a horse. In terms of having the joys and burnout of debugging long projects.
Well, and also that was our in a conversation with the head of our marketing department.
Yes.
So yeah, it left an impression because it was quite funny. No, Blaine's law is that if there is an apt analogy, he will find it.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that I proposed was just there for any given component, or like any component is nonlinear with sufficient current flow, but I guess that's a bit too stylized.
It could be that too.
What did you say, Joel?
I think that Blaine's law could be if there's an AES paper on the subject, Blaine knows about it and will tell you about it.
Blaine at least knows the abstract.
Yeah.
He'll have a citation ready.
Yeah.
Listen, Sean has read a lot more AES papers than me. That should be Olive's law.
That's fair.
And
that's one of the best things about following Sean on Twitter, which everyone should do because he's hilarious.
His Twitter account is absolutely
the
hilarious.
best.
Yeah,
he's got a great Twitter.
But he also is very regular in linking just like he linked some paper from the ASA that was referencing something from 1950 recently. I was like, how did you even find this? Anyway, yeah. So I think he deserves that more than me.
All right, and what would be listener's law?
Oh God, no.
Thou shalt have no treble.
Paste. Yeah, that's it. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, the Harman 2016 roll off is listener's law. If there's a target, listener will apply the Harman 2016 roll off to it.
I mean,
just the roll off.
That roll off, pretty dang close to where an IEM should kind of be responding until about like 13K.
What is so when you look at let's say DF plus 10 or DF plus 12 or something like that, right?
Or plus 24.
Well,
No,
okay, but
we're
that's
not
the
looking
meme.
at plus 24.
But like just regular DF plus 10 or DF plus 12, right? Let's just say that's reasonable. When you look at like where the actual treble level is up at like 15K, that's where you legitimately want it to be. Is that correct?
For DF plus 10?
Yeah, or 12.
Yeah, I would say that is just my target. Like what I usually do to deviate from that is on my head I have like an 11K peak on basically anything. So I'll dip a little bit extra there. But
okay.
Isn't
isn't there a dip somewhere in there already with DF plus?
There's like a narrow Q 10K dip, but there's actually a peak right after it.
Right.
At least in oratories calculated.
Yeah.
For the 5128.
So very few IEMs actually have that little energy above 10K. Like I'd say most are quite a bit more elevated there.
Yeah.
And is your sense it's just like this is just like air is not as desirable a quality as people imagine it to be?
I don't know about desirable, but I just don't think it correlates well to speakers.
Okay. Gotcha.
Which is why I'm excited for Truthier's product in particular. They seem to be
the Nova.
I don't even know how they're doing it, frankly, but they seem to be able to get a very smooth response up there.
I have been saying this, a similar thing to what you've indicated for over-ear headphones, though, for a long time, that it feels like the industry has been wrongly going for broke. So like the more money you spend on headphones, it feels like there's a trend with the more upper treble you get, and it's unnecessary. Maybe not in all cases, but for the most part, it's unnecessary. And now in recent times, it's gotten even worse with all the stealth magnets and all the it seems like an arms race to just go crank up the upper treble like crazy.
Well, it's a product of aging audiophiles, right?
So that's what I was going to say. Like if you have
this is a demographics problem.
If you're going to sell something at like $4,000 or something like that, who can afford that?
Well, not me, certainly.
People who are a little older, right?
I think Precog said something that was pretty instructive to me about how I kind of perceive those tuning choices. it's a risk taken by the manufacturer to increase technical performance.
Yeah.
Right.
Perceived.
And I feel like as you go up in price, people expect that.
Now, I don't know that I agree that goodness of technical performance is primarily associated with an upper treble boost.
I wouldn't either, but I would say it's probably not that uncommon.
Yeah, it's an attempt by the manufacturer to make people put something on and go, "Wow,
it's a bet."
That's so detailed.
Yeah, like I'd say like across the board, there are examples of that. The response that you'll get from people is more of that sort of wow effect. I just think that they're wrong.
Yeah, well, and I think that the way that comes out.
Can we ban Daniel in chat, by the way?
Oh, like actually.
No, look what he said. In conclusion, we will all return to Grado when we realize things like being over-ear and detachable cables are unnecessary.
Oh,
Jesus.
No.
Now that is a spicy take. Congratulations, Daniel! You just won the spicy take award for this stream.
Yeah, that's
an actually spicy take. Thank you.
That is the hottest take we've had in a while.
Well,
I mean, listen, I have had plenty of hot takes. The problem is that I've been on so long that all of my hot takes are now old hats.
Or they've been adopted in earnest.
Old hats.
Yeah. So anyways, with this upper treble boost, like people will go, oh wow, it gives an impression to people. But then you get the flip side of that, which is that you get some audiophile saying, oh wow, I just bought blank, and it's just exposed to me that all of my music is poorly recorded.
Okay, so that is a trope we should do an entire fucking episode on.
We should.
Because I hate that so much. Yeah. I have, and normal people, right? People who don't have the brainworms yet still think, oh, if I have a good headphone, I'm not going to like any of my music anymore. Yeah. What kind of fucking good headphone makes you hate all the music you like? That's the most insane concept that has become widespread.
There's a quote from Zeos of all people on this. I can't remember what headphone it was, but he was saying the problem with this headphone is that when you listen to it, you realize that most of your music is shit. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why the fuck would I want to listen to it then?
Yeah.
Yeah, damn.
Well, it's sort of
fun fact. Zeus is a fire type trainer. Bring a lot of water types.
What does that even mean?
What?
I have his gym badge. I beat his gym.
What is that?
It's a Pokemon reference. I'm sorry that you're too fucking Gen X to get a Pokemon reference.
Oh my god. I made a Dragon Ball Z reference yesterday in chat to Andrew, and he straight up didn't know what Super Saiyan is.
Oh my god.
You know Super Saiyan?
This is different language. You guys are speaking a totally different language.
These aren't
Andrew is the rare audio 0% weeb.
I'm actually with Andrew on this one, but that's not because I'm old. It's
that's a reference to Dragon Ball. Well, I mean, Dragon Ball was quite popular when most of us were children.
I grew up on a mountain.
I grew up on an island with no fucking internet connection.
You did.
I still saw Dragon Ball and Pokemon.
Yeah, no, it didn't really we didn't really get that stuff growing up. Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, presumably some people did, but it never entered into my, circle, I guess.
Blind Guardian is recorded in mono. Find a headphone that makes that appeal to an audiophile. Okay, but the thing is, does anyone actually like Blind Guardian?
I like Blind Guardian.
I mean,
why would you listen to Blind Guardian that's good in mono?
But hold on. It's not that I like the way that it sounds. I just like the idea of it. It occupies a similar space to Feuerschwanz in my mind. I was gonna ask, what's Joel? If you had a law to get back to this.
Oh, that's a good question.
What is Joel's left-hand law?
I feel like I can't come up with my own law. It has to be somebody else that comes up with a law for me.
It would definitely be around population average.
Maybe.
I feel like Joel's law is basically like... I'm just sort of... The thing that always strikes me the most about Joel is both that he invests a disproportionate amount of effort in stuff for audio relative to what he gets out of it. It's like you're like the converse case of the Pareto principle. It's like 95% of effort will be invested for 10% of sound quality returns.
Yeah, that's yeah.
I'm particularly thinking about your and it's if anyone I mean most people haven't seen this. Joel's DSP for spatial audio is like a masterwork.
Yeah.
But it's also so much work.
Yeah,
I would
so
not.
long.
By the way,
I think it makes a difference. I like the effect.
Oh yeah, no,
Sure.
But I also have not tested this on other people. I know that other people who have tried it have been like, oh yeah, I don't like it at all. And so I'd be really interested to sort of experiment more with more people trying it.
now is this something that could fit with Sean's the thing that he just posted about the?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm even using the same data set that he's
interesting.
tweeting about. I do not prefer the KU100 data because I have tried using the KU100 data as the basis for all of the free field responses, and I don't like the KU100. I find an average of the human free field responses to be much more natural sounding.
Interesting.
but what's your reference? That's what we need. Do we have the free field reference?
A free field reference?
Well, okay, a mixed sound field reference.
Oh yeah. No.
So it's like the thing Sean was riffing on with the
Yeah.
because he did the thing where people were comparing speakers to BRIRs, BRIRs. There has to be an easy way to say that.
Oh, that sounds right.
Burrs.
Someone just said I'm 60. See, they do agree that I'm older than Andrew, and I still know
Old
about
man
Dragon Ball.
economist.
I mean, I am old at heart, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that Blaine is actually older at heart than Andrew.
Oh
Yep.
yeah, no, that's
Maybe my well, I guess if you
Nope.
guys agree, it's not a hot
nope,
take.
not spicy at all.
Yeah.
How
everyone
old
agrees.
did you place him though? Like actually 60? At heart, I mean, not like obviously he's not 60.
I think 60 is about right.
I
think
could
that's
see 60.
that's
yeah.
the age at which you can start yelling. At
He's
clouds.
certainly a lot more curmudgeon-y
Yes.
than I am, right? So he's got the
Yeah.
old soul plus curmudgeon thing going on, and I don't think I have that
Yeah,
quite.
yeah. You just have the first part.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you've got the Canadian factor, which we have to correct for, Andrew. So
Yeah.
That's also true. I mean, Blaine's basically Canadian.
I keep trying to get him to move up to Canada, but
Yeah.
Well, you say
Among
that.
other
You
people.
just want me to move to the island so that we can move the office to
That's
the
right.
island.
so that I can move to the island.
How
so
about
that
you
you
move
don't have
to
to
the
pay
island
Vancouver
first?
rent anymore.
It's
That's
insane.
a solid reason.
It's
yeah.
gotten like even the last 2 years, it's gotten absolutely ridiculous. So I think we should all do it.
I think we're thoroughly off topic.
And then we can finally fund some of the studies that we want to do.
Yeah.
Just need more bodies.
Yeah, exactly. There's a joke in there about let the bodies hit the free field.
I always preferred the
So bad.
what is it? The Neil Cicierega version of bodies, floor corn.
Who?
I feel like that's a really old reference.
Neoblivis.
Literally, Neil Cicierega
Oh.
literally released that album like 4 years ago. You're just a zoomer.
okay. No. I mean, he's been doing stuff a long time, and I wasn't.
Well,
familiar
yeah,
with
it's
that
fucking
exact-
Lemon Demon.
Yeah.
We've gotten into weird esoterica as far as the music choices here, but I'm here
Yeah.
for it. I love it. Okay.
What is Andrew's law?
Thou shalt EQ, or thou shalt get the fuck out. No.
Well, I guess I better leave.
Oh yeah, I guess because there's a lot of people who don't
Yeah.
EQ, and they just like there's people who like don't EQ, but they was it cat? Just like
Good.
walking into frame.
Oh, wait, hold on. Bring Cat on stream.
Yeah, that'll increase viewership.
No, it wouldn't be EQ.
Oh.
My law would be that audio files are the problem. That would probably be
Yeah.
my law.
Hold on a
That's
sec.
the
You're
best law.
you're just stealing my Twitter post now.
Oh, did you post that?
Well, hold on. Like fucking. Yeah, I posted yesterday. I posted like
Oh, yesterday. No, but I also wrote a script for a video that's literally titled "Audiophiles Are the Problem."
so. Who stole from whom?
Yeah, that's fair. I suppose if I make the video, then yeah,
I
I'm
think-
still
I
not
think
sure.
Just convergent evolution.
Well, okay, so the thing for me was before I went to these like shows and the can jams and stuff like that, right? I sort of expected that most folks would hear this stuff similar to the way, at least somewhat similar. I had this sort of thought process of like most people hear things more similar than they do different. I still believe that. But then I went to these shows and realized that like, man, it's insane. Like I'd listen to something and be like, this is particularly horrible. And people would come to me and be like, did you hear how amazing this thing was? Like, and they'd just be talking about all these various different things. And then that was the moment for me. I was like, yep, audiophiles are the problem.
Okay, hold on. We have someone who's posted another hot take.
Okay.
Lucian Mink says, hot take, it's not that SJY stole anything. What does that mean?
Okay, I think I know what this is in
Oh,
reference to.
it's how people accused him of stealing ZMF's aesthetic with the wood cups and the big open badge in the center.
I have a thought process on that, and this is what I also expressed on this topic. The blunder wasn't aping. Well, the blunder was aping the design, the ZMF design, not because of people thinking of it as, oh, this is just ZMF at home. Rather, it was that people won't actually even bother to give a shit about the merits of the sound quality that he was able to, or that they were able to achieve, right? So now it's only ever going to be thought of in that light. And if there was a different design that they'd gone after, they probably would have had more staying power within the market, or would have made a bigger splash, I think, because acoustically it's pretty good from what I've seen.
Was it?
The measurements that
like
I've seen were. Oh, I didn't hear it, so I don't know.
Oh,
but
yeah.
But the measurements that I've seen were reasonable, right? So.
I was pretty straight with.
Okay. The measurements that DMS posted from the 4128 were they looked pretty reasonable. So.
I think it's a work in progress. I mean, honestly, like. Is the ripping off thing just because it has the silly flanged slidey bars?
No, it's the wood cup.
No, it's the wood cup.
Well, then that's...
Oh no, you heard a different product. We're talking about the one that actually looks like the ZMF Caldera, right?
Hold on. No,
as far as I'm aware.
Did you hear
the one that I
you heard
saw?
The silver one, right?
The one that I saw was made out of 3D printed. I'm gonna guess it was like FDM PLA.
No, this is
definitely
different.
not 3D. Yeah, we're talking about a wood product.
Yeah,
wood cup product with the
metal. Stabilized wood. Ew, gross.
Oh, what's the legal stuff? I don't know. I'm not familiar with the legal stuff.
And the legal. Oh Jesus, yeah.
I don't. I'm not familiar with what's going on there, but I just think like they made a mistake. It's a bad idea to do that when you have something that could be celebrated for its own merits, right? So you may as well design something that, you may as well make something so that the story around your product isn't just, oh, this is a knockoff of the whatever, right? So
yeah.
But people will definitely get up in arms about that. I'm sure they have.
Yeah, I mean, there's like if you go for something completely unique, there's still going to be plenty of people that have stuff to say about that.
Yeah. And no, I am joking about the lobbying. You should EQ or GTFO. I think actually EQ is a barrier that most people shouldn't have to overcome. Yeah. The onus should be on the manufacturer to make stuff that you don't need to EQ. But you should also EQ to make it your preference, right? But people shouldn't be forced to do that.
Yeah. That's why I was so before hearing it, that's why I was so interested in DMS's headphone.
Oh yeah, what do you guys think of that? I've heard it, but want to get your guys' thoughts.
So in talking to him before I got to hear it, that's something that we all kind of talk to each other and we all have similar ideas about this stuff. So he's like, yeah, why aren't manufacturers able to do this? make something that just sounds decent without EQ.
Right.
And then I heard it and I understood what he meant. Because
So
I know Blaine isn't like super fancy on it. I think the words he said at Can Jam to me were that I prefer HD 600. I would take
to the Omega. Yes.
Well,
yes.
it's a bit
I would
darker,
take
right?
Omega over. Yes.
Yeah.
I would take Omega over HD 600.
Right.
I'm not sure that I would take it over HD 650 sonically, provided the HD 650 is a good unit, which is a whole thing that needs to be worried about. But if the Omega is indicative of what like an average Omega would sound like, that's a hell of a headphone.
Did you hear it, Joel?
No, I didn't hear it. But Blaine likes things that are super bright. So
there's the context for that, and listener likes things that are super dark.
I don't think that Blaine's preferring the HD 600 means a whole lot to the average person.
Sure.
I will say that I don't think Omega was like super dark. If anything, the impression I got from its mid-range was like the other things that use that driver and have that slight hump in the 1K area. It's kind of dry timbrely. It doesn't really give the impression.
That section of the mids reminds me a bit of Focal.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have that too.
Yeah. It reminds me more of I don't know if you guys heard Juan's headphone.
Yes.
The Everest.
Yeah.
It reminds me more of that, but because the bass is more reserved and the chassis itself is more, at least to me, it seemed more open. It's more dry and not as I guess like cloyingly stodgy as Juan's was when I heard it.
I love the use of the word cloying. Yes, that should be used in audiophile descriptions.
Go for it. But yeah, I feel like it was a really good midpoint between something like Juan's headphone and something like Ruck's headphone, where Ruck's headphone, I feel there's like the coloration in the mids is a little too much for me.
Yeah, and at 5K.
That part didn't bother me as much, personally.
No, not on the Omega, on Ruck's.
Yeah, no.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah.
But like, he obviously knows that it's there.
I mean, yeah, but I feel like it'll probably be different depending on
the person. No,
this.
I mean, those were the two things that stood out to me with the Ruck phone was the mids and then the lower treble stuff. But I can see why people like it, right? The one thing I wanted to say about the Omega and so what you mentioned earlier about what he said before, what DMS said beforehand, was that something related to what he and I had sort of been talking about when we were kind of working on these projects simultaneously, was that there really isn't an excuse for bizarro tunings. And I kind of still think that that's true. Where things get tricky, though, is in the actual manufacture of stuff at scale, where I have to imagine that it is a bit more challenging to get every unit to be, the same, and to hit that same result, right?
Sure.
Blaine probably knows more about this definitely knows more about this than I do, but just, having spoken to a number of manufacturers about similar things, they've told me, we wanted to do it like this. I'm not going to say who, but we wanted to make it like this. But in the manufacturing process, we realized that it was far too inefficient to do this. So we had to go with a slightly different, method, and then that had this consequence or whatever. Right?
Now, notionally, this is why we're willing to pay so much for these products.
Yeah, exactly.
So it would be nice if more manufacturers were willing to take margins that were more commensurate to. Well, that's a separate complaint.
Yeah, but I do still sort of echo the base concept that DMS was sort of mentioning there, that there should be stuff like that exists, and I think on the DIY hobbyist side of things, people who are doing that kind of stuff, I think that's really where the best examples are going to come from, at least in the short term. So I think it's dope that people are doing that. And this goes back to the SJY thing. It's like no need to copy ZMF, really. you know, if you're going to make something great acoustically, make that the thing about it, you know, not, oh, this is going to be, you know, those things sell, so my thing will probably sell too, right? Got to find your own thing.
Yeah.
By the way, that's definitely Shurer in chat. Can you just flag truth?
Who am I doing this? Truth?
Truth.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Goodbye.
Oh, it clears all their messages too.
Yeah, it's quite funny how many, like, there's it's like there's stalkers. We have stalkers now. It's really weird.
They're just another kind of simp.
Yeah.
Yep. People just like being angry about something.
Yeah, it's hate simping.
Stalking is just dark triad simping.
Yeah, exactly. I mean that's just, I mean, there's stuff like that where it's like, you know, obvious, but then when you start to, the funny ones to me are like when you start to have conversations with people where you think it's going to go in a more positive direction, and then it turns out that it's just another example like that. Because, you know, like when you have conversations with people, maybe this is just me, but like I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt more often than not that they're going to be interacting in good faith. And then when it turns out that they're not, it's like, oh shit, that's where it's going to go.
The rug gets pulled.
Yeah.
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 I guess I shouldn't be so naive. It's the Baltic side of me that's. Yeah.
No, I think it's probably a good thing to be giving people the benefit of the doubt as often as you are.
Yeah.
As long as you could take the hit every time it turns out that they're not.
Senior C says that's because you're Canadian.
I say that ultimately it is God's job to judge people and our job to introduce them to him.
Yeah, but I'm not religious. I'm kind of an atheist, you know. So I don't know if
All right.
I just introduced them to the void and the absence. Yeah. I mean, I would say if anything, that's closer to me being Canadian. But yeah. Senior C, you had a question earlier that I wanted to address, and I'm just remembering what it was, and it was to do with whether or not any of us have considered getting laser eye surgery. I think it was you who asked this, to better mitigate HPTF due to glasses, right? I have considered it. It's not that expensive for me.
Flex.
The potential risks in terms of like long-term dry eyes aren't really a good trade-off for me right now. I don't mind wearing glasses, and I prefer very acoustically open headphones.
Yep.
That's a fair point. That's definitely a fair point. Listeners over there just he's just looking down on us poor ill-sighted you know.
Yeah, well, petting the cat.
Yeah. You can't see me, but I am too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, my prescription's fairly mild, so I've looked into it, and it apparently would be fairly easy for my situation.
Actually, hold on. Can I show how bad my prescription is?
Oh my
Jesus.
God.
Oh,
Jesus.
Can we see a side view of how thick the lenses are?
Yes, I think. I can't see.
Look at that. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you're doing good.
He leans forward and like knocks over the webcam.
Yep.
Yeah. Senior C says, I wear sunglasses all day inside and out, so I know the pain.
I think
Oh yeah, because you're in
He
Spain,
wears
aren't you?
sunglasses at night, so
Yeah.
he can. So he can.
So we can. Yeah.
I think we can just design a new style of glasses that do not interfere with headphones.
Yeah, like
and
if
then
they
we can sell
like
it to people for an insane amount of money, and some
Well-
audiophile somewhere will buy it.
I think
Valve
that's a great
already
idea.
did this. This is just
Am I
the
making
fucking
this up,
index ear speaker.
Or does Morpheus's glasses like just sit on his
Yeah.
Oh, pince nez.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that would
people
work.
could wear pince nez. There was one guy at CanJam actually wearing them, and I was
Smart.
like, "Wow, that's Chad."
That's smart. Yeah. I mean, contact lenses too. You could, but I'm not a fan of contact lenses personally.
Pince nez are so much more Chad, though.
I mean, to a certain extent, though, I don't know if there's a social cost to doing that.
I feel like
The social cost of Finn's nest.
I feel like it's less Chad when it's corrective lenses and not sunglasses. I don't know. The vibe just kind of goes away when it's now just corrective lenses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Needs snake oil in the audiophile glasses. I mean, we could make glasses that have tactile transducers. They'd be much better coupled to the head.
You could just throw some magnets in the arms and just say it'll improve the performance of your headphones.
We've reached the point of just severe cynicism here. Also, we've been going for over 3 hours.
Well, every
Hell
time
yeah,
I
let's
cut
keep
it,
going.
every time I cut it short, you call me, all kinds of names. I don't
Yeah, you're
understand.
doing great.
I mean, yes, no, I'm getting a taste of my own medicine here because I'm still a little sick.
Yeah.
But I think I'm gonna have to punch out soon.
Yeah, me too. But
Yeah,
speaking of punching out, somebody needs to develop a headphone where every time the bass hits, somebody comes over and kicks you in the chest and
This
yells
is just
macro contrasted your
transducers
ears
again.
So
I still think if
made
y'all
that.
haven't
It's the
tried it,
butt
that you need to.
kicker.
yeah,
Oh, I know someone that used something like that for a while. I don't know if he still does. He's in our Discord. His name is PC Chip.
oh
Yeah, he
This
has
this is actually returning to something. For a long time, a friend of mine used to suggest that there should be a invasively applied tactile transducer as an enhancer for headphone bass.
No, just put it in the chair.
Yeah.
Well, that was his premise too, but
Yeah, I know.
all right, guys. 3 hours and 3.5 hours later, I think we're gonna call it for the stream. There were, some.
Wait, you and Blaine give a spicy take first.
I was gonna say there's been some laughter, some crying. All the usual suspects arrived. We got to have fun. But all right, Blaine, go
I
ahead.
didn't
with the
get to
spicy
see Sean very much of metal. That was the two sadness things there.
take. What are you talking about? Sean's on the stream right now.
Oh my god.
That's true, and he's always in our hearts.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
I mean, listen, given how much flack I'm taking for it in the chat, my hot take is that I like the HD 800 without EQ. It's not perfect,
Yeah.
but I like it.
That's a hot take.
That's actually the thing about you, Blaine, that I have the hardest time understanding. That Blaine doesn't use EQ, just doesn't fit into my categories.
Yeah.
I don't know because we're not allowed to talk about it, but a certain preference research being done recently could have some data, maybe, that would suggest why it's preferred.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Oh, I mean, I think I know the answer. Why it's preferred is Blaine likes headphones that are bright as shit.
Yeah.
It's not that bright.
No, you're right. It's not. It's actually kind of warm in certain areas.
Yeah. If anything, that's the thing. I when I EQ, that's what I fix.
Yeah.
HD 800 too warm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, this was like a long time ago when you were working on regressions, where you were like asking us like, all right, what do we do for headphones like this? And for some reason the question was whether or not DMS and I thought that the HD, I think it was DMS, thought the HD 800 would be should be thought of as bright or not, and it was unconscionable to us that it would be anything other than bright. But you're right, it is only because of that 6K peak that it is thought of that way. So
I would say there's some extra sauce above
there's
6K
a little bit,
too.
yeah, for sure. But like there's extra sauce on the low end too, right? So
Yeah.
If it was less thick in the lower mids and had more bass and had just a little bit less at 6K and more above that, it would be the fucking HE1. So
HE1 has less ear gain. Slightly less.
is that true?
So it's the same for like 1K to 3K roughly, but then after that there's less on the HE1.
HE1, but it has that 5.5 or 6K peak.
Yeah.
I'm going to Crane Graph. I don't believe you.
They do look slightly different in the lower treble. Like it's not.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
I just want an excuse to fight, really.
Yeah, but I don't think it was I think it was the Comfort article that I did. I called the HD 800 a sneaky V shape, and I got shit on Reddit for that.
Well,
Even though I think that's still kind of true.
I would give you shit for the phrase sneaky V shape.
No, I
I'll
like
show
it.
you a
I think it
sneaky
works.
V-shape.
I think that when people hear V shape, they think it's got to have a lot of sub bass.
Mhm.
Like they just can't accept that something that doesn't have really good bass extension could ever be considered V shaped, even though I think that you are right. Like,
Well,
there is an elevation in the lower frequencies.
I mean,
Yes.
would you guys call the Hi-Fi Man headphones with the dip like the typical Hi-Fi Man sound signature V-shaped? I mean, like not the Sundara maybe, but like the
I'd call it a sneaky V shape.
yeah, the Sundara is a sneaky V-shape.
Okay,
There you
so
go.
yeah, that's how the sneaky qualifiers operate.
Yeah. But like let's say an Edition XS, would you say that's V-shaped?
That's just the Hi-Fi Man dip, which is just a sound signature all to its own.
I would call it U shape.
But you can't really call it U-shaped because it's not the ends that are tipped up. It's the
Yeah.
middle that's
It's just a dip.
yeah. It's more of a V than a U, I'd say.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's not strictly V either because,
Yeah,
V
the
is
bass
like
elevation isn't-
DT990, kind of thing.
Yeah, where it's significantly boosted in
Well,
the
it's
upper bass and lower
Yeah,
mid.
it's
Yeah.
more
Sorry.
consistently. What?
Nothing.
This one is V-shaped or U-shaped, both.
This one?
the Meze 109
Oh,
Primal.
yeah, I can't.
It's like
I can't see you.
It's the
Yeah.
you would hate the upper treble with this one. It's
I'll
quite
be dead
boosted up
straight.
there.
Whenever I look at the HE1's measurement, I'm just like, this is basically the EQ I've always done to the HD 800.
Oh, so you do like less ear gain than DF HRTF plus 10.
Well, no, it actually is more. It's just that it's. So you're talking about specifically in the 4 to 5K band?
yeah.
Mhm.
I
Yeah, it's more
mean,
than DF.
a little notch there, maybe.
So what I'm saying is it's less so where that dip is on the HE1, it lasts longer the higher you go in the frequency band compared to the HD 800S. That's what I'm saying.
I don't think you're right.
Wait, I have our unnamed database. I don't think it's in here.
Yeah, I was gonna say if only if only we had a working database.
we do.
Douglas measured it on 4128.
I measured it on 5128.
Oh, and it's uploaded?
That's the problem.
So mine isn't, but his is, I think. Yeah. Oh, that is the problem. That is the problem.
Man, if only both were compensated to each other's DFs.
Oh, yeah, that would be glorious.
I mean, they're also separate units. Oh, no. Yeah, they are separate units.
It's
feel
the
like-
HE1. It
Yeah, if
fucking better be.
If there's unit variation in the HE1, that's a big loss on.
I will be very unhappy if there's unit variation in the HE1.
It could be.
If there is, we should cancel Sennheiser. God,
I mean,
heaven.
But-
doesn't Crin have measurements of pad wear variation
Hold on. I actually have
on HE1?
I actually
Yeah,
have this.
he has 2 units measured, and one is listed as like new pads, and the other is listed as worn pads.
I can get to the bottom of this. I think.
Padware is acceptable. I'm
I
okay
would
with
also say that.
Sennheiser creating a headphone that has pads that are subject to the laws of physics. But for
Yes.
there to be unit variation, that's unacceptable.
Sennheiser would not, though. Like Sennheiser, of all the companies, they would be pretty good about that. Here we go.
You would assume so.
I have. Yes. Okay. I have both the HD 800 and the HE1. Come on. Where is the HD?
Are you going to show it on stream?
I'm trying to.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
come on. I don't have an image of the HD 800. I just have the goddamn
Oh my god.
RAW file. I hate it.
Okay, so
Okay, let me
Danger
show.
zone?
Let me show. I'll just send it in thingy first so you can actually see it.
oh joy.
I'm going to briefly respond to Danger Zone and just say you might have
Danger
trouble
Zone.
getting a KSC 75 EQ'd to Harman, bud.
Yeah, you cannot EQ a KSE 75 to Harman.
Yeah.
There.
It falls
There,
apart.
it's on stream now. This is HE1.
I've heard of
Okay.
that headphone.
So
It's a good
what
headphone.
I'm saying is the level is less compared to HD 800. And if I'm wrong here, I'd be surprised. But everything
you're right.
before, what is it, like 6K
Mm-hmm.
is less on the HE1. So the overall ear gain level here is less up until
Okay.
6K.
Why is it that when I take a screenshot on Critical's website, it does not copy to my clipboard? This is very abusive.
downloads
and
it as a
honestly
file.
Unacceptable behavior. Anyway, I've sent you an overlay of his DF's comp measurements.
So
Blaine doing his normalizing at 200 hertz thing.
what is going on with the HD 800 here though? I haven't seen it that low.
It's Blaine's normalization.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's exactly what's
mean,
going on.
if he had normalized at 500 hertz, it wouldn't be that different.
Or 1K.
Blaine manipulating the
Manipulating the data, yeah.
So sue me for using the pressure band for alignment. Also, there's
To be fair, I do like normalizing at 200 hertz
Yeah.
quite often. I think I actually did it earlier in this stream.
yeah,
But
in this case, given the trends for both of them, it makes the trends, similarities and differences more obvious, particularly because it makes the modes more centered.
mm-hmm.
Someone says trash trouble for 60K. 6K peak. Let's go through it. 6K peak, 9.5K peak.
Mm-hmm. 13, 12.
Yeah, 13. Well, that's closer to 14. 13 and a half.
You guys are reading the tea leaves.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't.
We're doing the
I'm
thing
reading the
that
tea
we
leaves.
told people they should not do.
That was the whole
Well,
point. Yeah.
I mean, my whole point here was you knock down the lower mids on the HD 800, you up the sub bass, you
Yep.
take out the big peak, and you up the upper mids a little bit, and it's pretty goddamn good.
So what I would
So
do with the HD 800 is I would fill in the 1.5 stuff.
Yeah. A bit. And I think how much is sort of variable. Right?
Yeah.
Like, obviously the HE1 has a dip there still, and I actually find
Yeah.
the HE1 extremely pleasing to listen to.
It's very nice.
I would really see the HE1 FR added to one of these comparisons.
It's not as detailed
Also,
as other headphones.
What the fuck does that even mean?
I'm just saying.
What does detailed mean?
It doesn't have quimble. It's
Oh my god.
it's overtones.
yeah. Actually, I agree.
Treble stalactites or detail. Why do you think the subtonic storm is so peaky? Oof.
So there have been a few explanations offered for why people like subtonic storm's rather rocky treble response. I've heard people say that it has to do with like in-room treble response being similarly rocky. I don't know how much I agree, but
I mean, it will be to some extent.
I mean, yeah. So I see why they say that. Personally, I just like it.
It's okay to
think
like
it's pretty
rocky
nice.
treble.
Yeah, I think so.
are you using a TV in your room as a film?
I am. I mean, in my
Oh
living
my
room.
god!
I'm sitting in a living room. Yeah.
I mean, I'm using my computer monitor as Phil here.
Oh my god.
All right.
Gotta work with what you got, boys.
On that terrible disappointment, I think it's time
Yeah.
to end. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out and for all the questions. I know we didn't get to as many peppers as we would have wanted to, but that's the consequence of having more of us in a more active discussion. So I appreciate all the folks here. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, listener. Big thanks to
for
Blaine as
having
well.
me.
And everybody, if you haven't already, check out the article linked in the description for a sense of what this was all about.
Well, originally,
What
least
maybe
the
the first 30
first-
minutes
yeah.
of the 4 hours was about.
Exactly. And otherwise, have a great weekend, everybody.
Later, guys.
some guy said
I shall go tend to my meat.